Chapter 512. A bereaved race. This name initially sounded rather strange to most people. However, many people also had recognized this name. Many experts who possessed outstanding strength knew that the human race wasn't the aboriginal inhabitant of this world. Instead, this species was the aboriginal inhabitant of this world. However, these aboriginal inhabitants had also gradually disappeared before everyone's eyes after they had experienced intense battles with the ancestors of the human race for countless years. Therefore, these species had gradually transformed into a mere name for everyone, a bereaved race. An incredible and bloody battle had occurred between the ancestors of human race and the bereaved race at that time. But it wasn't clear for how many thousand years this era of turmoil had continued before it had gradually quietened down. It could be said that rivers of blood had been spilled. It wasn't clear how many individuals had died on both sides. The bereaved had been completely wiped out at that time. But it wasn't clear how many years ago this had happened. In fact, many people had already forgotten this name long ago. These bereaved would occasionally come into existence. However, their quantity was always very less. Therefore, only the name of bereaved had survived. Therefore, many people didn't know much about the bereaved. Even those experts of Sage Realm and Great Sage Realm weren't an exception. In fact, most people basically didn't know anything about them. However, this name had again appeared on everyone's mouth along with the appearance of that heavenly crater. After all, traces of the bereaved race had been found inside that heavenly pit. This news had quickly spread across the entire Great Way State. It had also alarmed the entire meteor sect because the appearance of the bereaved could possibly sway the rule of the entire meteor sect. In fact, it could even affect the rule of the entire human race. Nobody dared to underestimate these bereaved. They didn't have clear evidence. However, the human race had faced turmoil many times in the past because of these bereaved. Therefore, the people had gotten scared since these bereaved had been found. Soon, a message got disseminated from the martial emperor of the Way State. He had previously wanted to examine the princes. However, he didn't want to examine them anymore. In fact, he had asked them to go inside that heavenly pit. Whoever would find the news of the arrival of the elusive bereaved first would be appointed as the next emperor of the Great Way Empire. And this information had incited all those ambitious princes who were fighting for the title of emperor. This had nothing to do with strength. It looked as if whoever would find out the news of bereaved first and report back would inherit the title of emperor. "We can't miss this chance. This is the best opportunity," Yishuan said. He had quickly realized that this was the best opportunity for the 23rd prince. In fact, this was an opportunity that could lay the foundation of a dynasty. The martial emperor of the Way State didn't care about the position of the emperor. However, the news about the appearance of the bereaved would have alarmed the meteor sect. And he could obtain the meteor sect's reward if he got hold of the information before the others. And that would certainly help him in cultivating further. "However, you won't be going there. Wood Dragon and I will go instead," Yishuan addressed the 23rd prince. The 23rd prince was merely an expert of the semi-sage realm. Therefore, the plan of Yishuan and Wood Dragon would go in vain if the prince died by accident. In any case, the martial emperor of the Way State only cared about the news. Yishuan and Wood Dragon didn't delay much. The important thing was to obtain the information firsthand before anyone else. Moreover, it seemed as if the number of bereaved that had appeared might not be too many. Otherwise, the martial emperor of the Way State would have personally moved into action. Moreover, other countries would also send their experts after some time. And their advantage would be gone by that time. However, both individuals hadn't even set off when they received an order from the Northern Dipper organization. The organization had asked them to thoroughly examine the situation inside this heavenly crater. Had bereaved genuinely appeared there or not? These two individuals hurriedly traveled across half of the Great Way State. And they soon arrived in the Lusong city. This city was nearest to that heavenly crater. The Lusong city had recently experienced a brutal battle. So, the blood of unknown beasts was sprayed on the entire city wall. It was looking exceptionally dismal under the light of the setting sun. It seems that this locality has experienced a violent war. Yishuan looked at the chopped flesh and limbs above the city wall as he said, "And I've just got the news that this city has experienced a raid of ancient demon beasts. It is said that many ancient demon beasts have come out crawling from that heavenly crater. It is said that they had already vanished from this world many years ago," the wood dragon replied. These ancient demon beasts had only existed in the records. Many such beasts had been annihilated by the ancestors of the human race in the past. The ancestors of the human race had faced an incredibly harsh environment when they had arrived in this world. Moreover, those bereaved had only been a part of it. In fact, it wasn't even known how many high-handed powerhouses of older generation had been slaughtered by those ancient demon beasts. "This is kind of startling," the wood dragon said. "Many forces would arrive because of the appearance of the bereaved. So, this matter would only become more and more complicated." These two individuals entered the city very easily because no soldier was keeping watch. That was because the soldiers had been slaughtered by a recent wave of the ancient demon beasts, which had burst into the city. In fact, not many ordinary people were left there either. Most of them had run away. The people who were still there in the city at this moment were the bold and daring experts. Most of them were the experts of the truth great complete realm. In fact, they could only be considered at the bottom rank in this city, which was full of experts. Many sage experts were also present among them. Auras of some of these experts seemed weakened due to distance, while some still seemed powerful. All of them were outstanding experts of the same rank. However, there wasn't any great sage expert present among them. Perhaps, the situation hadn't reached to the extent that it needed the presence of the great sage experts. After all, the arrival of a few bereaved wasn't enough to alarm the great sage experts. The two individuals went to a restaurant after they entered the city. The owner of this restaurant had already fled. Only the experts were left, and were taking rest here. They were whispering among themselves as they discussed about all kinds of gossips and news that had rushed in from everywhere. "I don't know what is at the bottom of that heavenly crater that so many ancient demon beasts have come out crawling from it. These ancient demon beasts must be much more powerful than the ones in this world. Can there be an ancient world concealed inside of it?" someone speculated. The so-called ancient world was a kind of microcosm, or a region that had remained isolated from the rest of the world because of some reason. Therefore, many organisms which had gone extinct in the present age were often found lurking inside these regions or microcosms. Such ancient worlds weren't seen very frequently. However, their numbers were certainly large. It wasn't known for how long the calamity of war had ravaged the world since the ancient times. Many almighty experts had broken entire stars into countless pieces with a mere slap. So, that insanely fierce battle must have shattered the world into fragments. And these fragments were now home to a huge number of such extinct creatures. It's hard to say. However, nobody has found any trace of these creatures since so many years. So, how would we have come to know that so many ancient demon beasts lived underground if that meteor hadn't fallen from the sky? Whoever has tried to go inside so far has met a violent death, someone regretfully spoke up. I've heard that a random cultivator with no background of the initial stage of the sage realm has died a tragic death therein. He had gone inside recently, and I heard his endless miserable screams. So, I reckon he must have met a violent death inside. Many people trembled with fear as they heard this. An expert of the initial stage of the sage realm had gone inside and met such a tragic end. Suddenly, the thought of rushing inside had extinguished from the minds of many truth realm experts. A sage expert had died so miserably. However, they were mere truth realm experts. Those talks make it seem like a big and ominous underground place. The wood dragon softly spoke to Yishuan. They had changed their clothes after they had come out of the imperial capital. So, they weren't wearing the ostentatious uniforms of the Northern Dipper organization anymore. Yishuan nodded. The most dreadful thing wasn't that something had killed the expert of the initial stage of the sage realm. Rather, it was the fact that it was the unknown. They didn't know anything. So, they didn't know what ominous things could be lurking down there. We will have to find a way and explore this place. The great sage experts will possibly arrive here quickly if this place genuinely has some startling secret, Yishiwen replied. Only some sage experts were present inside the city at this time. However, this didn't mean that those great sage experts didn't care about this matter. We could presently be in a city which might have a massive underground pit of treasures if that's the case. However, this isn't certain. Wouldn't it be better if we can dig somewhere and confirm? Someone proposed an idea. How it can be so simple? We may find the ancient world if we dig here. Moreover, it's very difficult to deal with those ancient demon beasts. How we will stop those beasts if a lot of them came out at once? It wasn't that nobody had thought to drill the ground and enter that ancient world. However, nobody had dared to do that. After all, they wouldn't be able to stop those beasts if several of them came out of the pit. And it might even give rise to a startling turmoil. It wasn't clear how many people would die in this turmoil. Therefore, nobody had dared to casually bear the deed of such caliber. Meteors appeared in the sky and filled the entire horizon, while everyone was still discussing this matter. It was a magnificent sight to behold. Suddenly, everyone's gaze fell on those meteors as they streaked across the horizon. Experts with formidable auras were riding those meteors, and they were flying directly towards that heavenly crater. These are the meteor sect's experts, right? Someone asked. The meteor sect was the leading force of the meteor world. Meteor sect alone was a massive force. However, this didn't mean that there were no other sects and forces. Moreover, there were numerous random cultivators with no backgrounds. However, these forces couldn't sway the dominance of the meteor sect. Yes, they are. I've heard that those meteors are the ancient flying tools of the meteor sect. They are known as the flying fire meteors. Their flying speed is very fast. So, they are most appropriate for traveling somewhere quickly. Someone recognized and said, They look like a group of glorious stars every time they go out and come in. These divine tools are specially made for traveling anywhere quickly. This meteor sect genuinely deserves to be the super force that leads our entire meteor world. Nobody can match this background. Someone sighed with emotion and said, Divine tools were exceptionally precious for the majority of experts. And often, divine tools were entirely used in battles for combat purposes. However, divine tools that were made for other purposes were very small in number. Therefore, even the tools which had been used in several battles were good to use. Hence, this made it evident that the meteor sect was genuinely very rich and overbearing. To be continued. Chapter 513. However, only a small portion of the experts would get to use such extravagant devices, even if it's the meteor sect we are talking about, someone explained. Other people heaved a sigh of relief one after another. These people might have considered joining the meteor sect unconditionally if every expert of the meteor sect could have this type of divine tool of their own. However, it had to be said that the meteor sect wouldn't necessarily make use of these weak experts. After all, the meteor sect commanded the meteor world. They had very high standards. And an average person couldn't fulfill their strict entry requirements. Everyone's gazes fell upon meteor sect's people since they had just burst into the heavenly crater. Suddenly, numerous sounds of discussions echoed in the restaurant. The people of the meteor sect can't help but move into action. They are always the first ones to react every time the bereaved appears. Such a big troop has arrived this time after they heard that only a few bereaved may have appeared. Moreover, nobody in that group is below the sage realm. They are all extremely ferocious, someone exclaimed. Yeah, a large group of experts have also moved into action apart from the meteor sect. What are we doing here when such powerful experts are present here? Someone unwillingly spoke up. One must put their life on stake if they were weak and wanted to gain some big fortune. A lot of people aren't able to sit still right now. Not many of the bereaved are left now. However, they still possess a lot of wealth that was handed down to them. So, whoever will grab those bereaved will certainly advance by leaps and bounds. They will obtain a startling heritage. Everyone guessed that the current situation might give rise to a bloody battle. After all, many experts had arrived. However, not many people would be getting the benefits in the end. So, these people might get killed and buried here. However, Yi Shiwen and Wood Dragon left the restaurant soon because the other people of the Imperial clan had also arrived. They looked grandiose. After all, they were also a big group of sage experts. In fact, their prestige wasn't less than that of those experts of the Meteor sect. However, they didn't look as united as the experts of the Meteor sect. In fact, every team looked entirely different from the other. Everyone knew that this moment must be the deciding moment of the contest. Whoever would obtain enough information on the bereaved would obtain the throne this time. And one would definitely clinch the title of emperor if they obtained exact information about the arrival of the bereaved. One would lose the advantage if they didn't act quickly and now. However, they had also heard that a sage expert had gone inside the heavenly pit, and had died miserably screaming as a result. Therefore, they didn't dare to go inside the pit even if they had arrived. They had no choice but to think their next move once they had gathered here. The majority of princes hadn't arrived among their princely forces. They had only sent their most competent subordinates. After all, the majority of princes hadn't reached the sage realm themselves. Therefore, they could have lost their lives easily even if they had merely come in the way. However, a few princes had arrived still. I've heard that the 23rd brother has recently become very popular. He has recruited a ferocious great master of alchemy, and that great master has wiped out the 4th younger brother's force in a flash. An approximately 30-year-old young man steadily opened his mouth and said to the other princes. The way in which the other people were addressing him made it seem that he was the second prince. He had obviously become the eldest prince after the 4th prince was killed and the eldest prince was purged. He also had the biggest advantage, and the maximum number of supporters. In fact, many rumors even stated that the biggest factor because of which the eldest prince had taken the risk to raid the imperial palace was that the second prince had forced him to do so. He had left him to feel that he couldn't achieve anything by using ordinary methods against his younger brother. Therefore, he had no choice but to resort to extreme methods while facing competition from this second prince. And he was suppressed by the Wei State's martial emperor in the end as a result. A lot of experts who had gathered around him were his subordinates. And most of them looked fierce. There were all kinds of people in that group. However, most of them were sage experts. In fact, these people had gained an outstanding reputation in the entire Great Wei Empire in their early age itself. It's very surprising. 4th brother was definitely obscure. However, his insight wasn't that bad. I wanted to recruit that dwarf tiger. But I hadn't thought that he would fall into the hands of the 4th brother. So, his strength wasn't bad. However, he didn't turn out to be a match for that dragon master. In fact, he was killed in a few moves only. Even his sage-level sword couldn't protect him. To think that even a peak sage expert didn't turn out to be this dragon master's match. I wonder what his origin is. Another prince who was standing beside him opened his mouth and said. He looked a bit similar to the second prince. However, he appeared somewhat frail in comparison. However, everyone knew that this was only a deceptive outward appearance because he was none other the 3rd prince. And he had gained outstanding military achievements in the entire Great Wei State. He had once gone into expeditions in all the directions, and had extended the territory of the Great Wei Empire. He was very dreadful in reality. There are so many experts in this world. What's strange if you don't know a few of them? There was another formidable-looking prince beside the 3rd prince. And this method could be tested out. Well, look who we have here. Aren't those the 2 experts the 23rd has recruited? That man who has worn the dragon's mask is that so-called dragon master. I have heard that he's a great master of alchemy. In fact, even Jiang Zhouqing had personally arrived and invited him to participate in the pill processing meeting that would take place after many years. The second prince had sharp eyes. He had recognized Yi Shiwen in an instant. He sighed with emotion in his heart. He didn't want to recruit a great master of alchemy now alone. He would still wish to recruit a great master of alchemy even after he had become the emperor of the Great Wei Empire. However, he hadn't expected that his 23rd younger brother would recruit one before him. I've heard that this great master of alchemy is apparently quite insane. Geez, seventh brother, you weren't present that day. So you haven't seen him crossing the tribulation that day. It was an overwhelming tribulation cloud. I have never seen someone crossing such a sage realm tribulation. A smile appeared at the corner of the mouth of the third prince. He hadn't even shot a glance at the seventh prince as he had said this. The seventh prince was considered the top-notch expert of this generation in the imperial clan. He had become a supreme expert of the peak of sage realm at this young age. Moreover, he was only half a step away from entering the small perfection level of the sage realm. He was genuinely the most talented individual among the princes. However, he wasn't present in the city when Yi Shiwen was crossing the tribulation. He had gone out of the city because of some other matter. So what? He is only a great master of alchemy, nothing more. One can say that he is domestic dog of our imperial clan. The seventh prince spoke up in a disdainful tone. These princes currently didn't have too many powerful experts in their groups. However, many profound senior experts were present in the imperial clan. Everyone in the imperial clan had become an expert in order to maintain rule over this enormous Great Way state. It wasn't clear how many experts had taken birth in these many years and were hidden behind the scene. Just consider that old emperor who was hanging between life and death at present. He was also a senior sage expert. Therefore, the seventh prince believed that tidying up people like Yi Shiwen wouldn't be an issue if he were to ascend to the throne. The 23rd prince is a loser. He didn't even dare to come out on such a big occasion. He doesn't even have that much courage. How he can become the emperor of my Great Way state? The seventh prince sneered and said. He didn't care about the 23rd's robust force, which was in the favorable situation at present. However, the people who were present in the surroundings looked normal despite his remarks. He unfolded his hands to catch that spear even though it appeared like an incoming dragon. However, he didn't dare to catch that spear with one hand like Yi Shiwen had. Whoosh! The battle spear fell into his hands along with a tearing sound. It seemed as if a leather belt had peeled off the flesh. This collision didn't produce a metal clanging sound like it had when the spear had fallen into Yi Zaiwen's hand. In fact, the seventh prince was almost sent flying backwards by the impact of that spear. The skin of his palms was grated within a split second. And the tip of the spear had almost pierced his chest. Tap, tap, tap! The seventh prince couldn't control his feet, and was forced to retreat several steps. He stepped backwards on the ground, and left his huge footprints to trail in his wake. However, he couldn't stop the momentum of the spear. In fact, the entire spear was still wrapped with an incredibly tremendous force. Whoosh! A golden light flashed. Yi Shiwen suddenly appeared behind seventh prince. A big foot suddenly swept out and kicked downwards at the seventh prince's back. Be careful! The second and third prince promptly yelled. They used to be at each other's throats on ordinary days. However, that was their internal dispute. But Yi Shiwen was an outsider for all of them. However, they couldn't act on time. Yi Shiwen had already kicked their brother. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's kick struck seventh prince. Meanwhile, the tremendous force of the spear had also been pushing him from the opposite direction. Poochie! The seventh prince got caught between the two tremendous forces. However, he couldn't persist against their might. He couldn't hold that spear in his hand, and it penetrated into his chest. And blood splashed out and sprinkled the blue sky as a result. Bang! One end of the spear had ferociously pierced into the ground. A huge pit had been opened on the solid ground as a result. And the other end of the spear had penetrated the chest of the seventh prince. The seventh prince appeared in a strange situation. He opened his big eyes wide while hanging on the spear that had pierced his chest and nailed him to the ground. He couldn't believe this. He had been intensely proud of his strength. However, he had looked so vulnerable in front of Yi Shiwen. However, it didn't matter how unwilling he was. It was useless. After all, he had been crucified to the ground. So, it seemed he was destined for this outcome when he had decided to attack and kill Yi Shiwen. Perhaps, he hadn't expected that the situation could turn out like this. After all, he had already entered the peak of the Sage Realm many years ago. And Yi Shiwen had recently entered the Sage Realm. And most importantly, he had never thought that Yi Shiwen would dare to fight back. After all, he was a prince. So, he had the status of royalty. And Yi Shiwen was merely a consecrate expert of his 23rd brother. So, one could even say that Yi Shiwen was merely a servant if one were to speak in a coarse language. Therefore, he had believed that Yi Shiwen wouldn't dare to counterattack him. However, he hadn't thought that this could happen. He was supercilious and rampant. But Yi Shiwen was also a lawless person. He had killed the disciples of the Law Enforcement Hall right after he had entered the true martial university. So, what was an insignificant prince to his eyes? Why he wouldn't dare to counterattack? Even the Wood Dragon had also planned to kill all these people so that they could remove 23rd Prince's obstacles in acquiring the throne. Yi Shiwen felt an astonishing blade energy as it swept towards him from above. It shrouded him and chopped the space little by little. The golden divinities suddenly formed a pair of golden wings behind Yi Ziwen's body. He disappeared without any trace in a flash, and distanced himself from the onslaught of this blade energy. Bang! The long blade crashed into the ground and opened a huge crack. The crack proliferated for more than a dozen miles, and went out of the city. Yi Shiwen raised his head to see. He found that it was the Imperial clan's old consecrate expert who had launched this attack. He was holding 4 long blades, and they had formed a terrifying array of blades. Moreover, each of those 4 long blades was a sage tool. He evidently possessed unfathomable strength. The old consecrate shot an ominous glare at him and said, "That was a good method. The 7th prince is the most talented person of the younger generation in the Imperial clan. However, you have completely dominated him. A person of your caliber must be very popular. But why have I never heard of you?" The old consecrate was looking at Yi Shiwen with a bit of doubt in his eyes. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen had suddenly emerged out of nowhere. He had never heard anything about Yi Shiwen. Other princes also had powerful consecrates in their factions, like the dwarf tiger who had initially disappeared for a long time. However, he had then reappeared in the 4th prince's faction. However, people could still search and obtain information about the dwarf tiger as long as they were determined. In fact, his information was no secret whatsoever. The dwarf tiger couldn't escape as long as people had taken the initiative to find out. Therefore, people had eventually found out about his whereabouts. However, Yi Shiwen and Wood Dragon were different. They simply had no past records. Therefore, they couldn't find information on Yi Shiwen even though they had used the network of the entire Imperial clan. They weren't afraid of Yi Ziwen's background. Instead, they were afraid of the fact that they couldn't look up his background. Yi Shiwen replied back, "What's strange in that? I had been picking drug ingredients in the depths of remote mountains for many years. I wasn't born here. It's quite normal if you don't know about it." Everyone was considering him as a great master of alchemy. So, he also decided to act as one. However, he was secretly vigilant in his mind. In fact, he had already set his martial power at its max. This reply was omnipotent. After all, everyone knew that these alchemy masters used to roam inside old forests and deep mountains for many years. And only those alchemy masters who had the support of some big forces didn't do so. Otherwise, the other ones were always short of drug ingredients. So, this was a common thing. However, Yi Shiwen still didn't dare to relax. After all, he might suffer a setback if that old guy suddenly launched another surprise attack. Yi Shiwen didn't care about those princes. However, this elusive old guy had really made him vigilant. In fact, that old guy could have scored the winning point in one shot a moment ago. And Yi Shiwen might have died if his movements had been any slower. After all, that old guy had resorted to extreme methods, and hadn't showed any mercy. Yi Shiwen was alert. However, he wasn't very worried. He might not be able to defeat this old consecrate. However, he could escape his attacks as long as he wanted to. He had escaped from the hands of a great sage expert in the past. And he had been able to do that even when he hadn't even entered the semi-sage realm. However, one could say that he had also experienced a situation of life or death at that time. This old consecrate was certainly ferocious. However, he still couldn't be compared with a great sage expert. Who in the world is this man? I can't believe those alchemy masters can be so ferocious. The third and second prince used their divine sense to communicate with each other. They weren't convinced that Yi Shiwen was genuinely an alchemy master. After all, it wasn't that they didn't know about the fighting strength of alchemy masters. Alchemy masters couldn't scare people with their own strength. In fact, their strength often wasn't equal to that of a martial expert of the same rank. However, the thing that made everyone scared was their huge network of connections. One or two senior experts might appear for their help at any time if someone attacked them, especially if someone attacked those great masters of alchemy. And the said attacker would then be in an enormous amount of trouble. However, Yi Ziwen's performance had completely toppled the impression of the alchemy masters that they had formed in their minds. In fact, this was simply ridiculous. Why would these people have been so confused if all the alchemy masters were so frightening? They weren't convinced that he was a great master of alchemy. However, his frightening battle strength was undeniable. Therefore, it was possible that there could be some other reason to it. There has to be a different reason. All of you know what kind of strength seventh younger brother possesses. He is the top-notch expert of the younger generation of our imperial clan. And there's no doubt about it. However, he appeared like a toy in front of this man. This man has completely dominated him. Such strength, gee, I don't know where the 23rd brother has recruited him from. The second prince sighed and said, how come he hadn't come across such a person? This man is a huge threat. Moreover, I can see that this man is also very ambitious. The 23rd brother may not be able to control him. It doesn't matter how many disputes we have within our imperial clan. That's our personal matter. But how we can let other people interfere in it? The second prince continued. What do you mean by that, second brother? The third prince asked. To be continued. Chapter 5:15. Yi Shiwen obviously didn't know what the second prince and the third prince were planning. He was only looking at the imperial clan's old consecrate who was in front of him. However, that old consecrate of the imperial clan was also looking back at him in an attempt to evaluate him. Unexpectedly, the old consecrate didn't attack Yi Shiwen anymore. He had also seen that Yi Ziwen's movement was extremely quick. Yi Shiwen wasn't a match for him. However, it wouldn't be easy for him to kill Yi Shiwen either. In fact, there was also the chance of Yi Shiwen making a counterattack. Moreover, he would only weaken his team's strength if he attacked Yi Shiwen right now. A lot of forces might arrive here because of the appearance of the bereaved. A portion of the meteor sect had already arrived here. And nobody knew how many forces could arrive later. Therefore, killing Yi Shiwen would only weaken the Great Weiss Imperial strength at this time. It seemed that everyone had forgotten about the death of the seventh prince. Even that imperial clan's old consecrate didn't care about his death. And he didn't take any punitive measures against Yi Shiwen either. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but admire the heartlessness of the imperial clan. You are valuable only when you're alive. You would be of no use if you've died. Nobody would speak for you. Nobody would stand by your side. The people of the imperial clan hurriedly rushed inside the heavenly pit after watching these scenes. Yi Shiwen and Wood Dragon were behind these people. They were obviously witnessing the so-called division of so-called relatives and strangers, close ones and unknowns. And these two individuals were undoubtedly the strangers. These two didn't wish to become cannon fodder for the imperial clan, especially the Wood Dragon. He was very ambitious, to the extent that he was eager to get control over the 23rd prince and make him his puppet. How he could voluntarily become cannon fodder for someone else. Everyone saw countless heavenly treasures all over the place as soon as they arrived in the underground world. Moreover, there were many of the precious herbs which had already vanished from the outside world several thousand years ago. This place is an ancient world. It may have been isolated from the outside world several thousand years ago. Therefore, many of these herbs can't be found in the outside world. Yi Shiwen swept his glance over those heavenly treasures and said. He knew many pill-making methods. However, he could only use a few of them because many of the raw materials required for those pill-making methods were such heavenly treasures that had already extinguished many years ago. Therefore, it was useless to have the pill-making methods without the necessary raw materials. Yi Shiwen must think of a method to replace those drug ingredients that were required for these pill-making methods if he wanted to walk on the road of alchemy. And this was a humongous task. However, Yi Shiwen found several drug ingredients that were required for many pill-making methods he knew with a cursory glance. Now, everyone will separately look for the whereabouts of the bereaved. You must know that this matter is related to the ownership of the throne of our Great Wei state. I won't say much. You do your best. The old consecrate had barely finished speaking when he transformed into a streamer and disappeared before everyone's eyes. Yi Shiwen, doesn't it seem that this old consecrate is the real main force sent by that old geezer of a martial emperor of Wei state to look for the bereaved? The wood dragon said. Yi Shiwen nodded. This was quite possible. After all, it was useless to depend upon these princes. They were weak, and also had limited influence. However, this old consecrate could accomplish the task. And these princes might only be an element to attract attentions of others. In fact, this was a very strong possibility. However, Yi Ziwen's vision was wandering on the present scene. The atmosphere at this place had gradually begun to become intense. There was a state of mutual hostility since there was no controlling factor on these people after the departure of that old consecrate. So, the princes and their subordinate forces had begun to tense up. The wood dragon had considered taking advantage of this opportunity to kill these people. And then, he would have put the blame on those unknown ancient demon beasts that were present in this uncharted underground world. Even the wood dragon had thought along these lines. So, what could one say for these crafty princes? Therefore, it would be better if they began to explore instead of believing each other at first. Then, they could at least continue to pretend that they were working in cooperation. However, everyone was each other's enemy because this task was entirely related to the ownership of the throne. So, how they could be working in cooperation? The princes had quickly parted their ways after the departure of the old consecrate. They had trod on the rainbow lights, and had disappeared from there. They didn't want to stay any longer. Soon, only Yi Shiwen and Wood Dragon were left. Both individuals quickly collected these precious herbs that were present before their eyes, and put them in their pouch. However, they hadn't even examined the surroundings thoroughly when they sensed that a spooky monster was arriving. The head of this monster was like that of a tiger's, and its lower body had a tail like that of a snake's. It was a kind of ancient demon beast. Yi Shiwen saw it, but ignored it still. But that didn't stop that demon beast from approaching them. Yi Shiwen knew that it was powerful. It was an ancient demon beast which was at the intermediate stage of the sage realm. They had arrived here a moment ago. However, they had already met a sage realm ancient demon beast. It wasn't surprising why those people couldn't dare to come inside. This place was like a hell where sage realm beasts were running amok. That tiger-head monster rushed towards Yi Shiwen to rip him apart with its claws. The entire space boiled up like a boiler, and exploded loudly. Yi Shiwen shot his palm in reply. The fire cloud's falling sky hand suddenly attacked that tiger-head monster, and grabbed it. The tiger-head monster still looked very tyrannical even though Yi Shiwen had grabbed it. It was unceasingly roaring and howling. It tried to attack Yi Ziwen's big hand with all its might. Bang! Yi Shiwen slapped the tiger-head monster, and it exploded. Then, its essence, blood, and demon core were absorbed by the heavenly source mirror. Be careful. The monsters at this place are more tyrannical than the ones outside. This monster was only at the intermediate stage of the sage realm. However, its fighting strength was perhaps more than that of some weak experts of the late stage of the sage realm. Yi Shiwen immediately judged the fighting strength of the tiger-head monster. It deserved to be called as an ancient demon beast. After all, it was far more tyrannical than the present time's demon beasts. The wood dragon nodded in fear. The tiger-head monster's fighting strength was perhaps not less than his. Yi Zaiwen's attack was powerful. However, the wood dragon would have had to go through a long battle before he could have killed this monster if he were to be in Yi Zaiwen's place. This place was far more dangerous than what he had imagined. I just saw a matrix formation placed at the entrance on our way here. I think it must have been laid down to seal this world. And that seal might have remained intact for countless years if that meteorite hadn't crashed and broken it, Yi Shiwen said. They had arrived in the ancient world, and had seen that a huge meteor was lying at the bottom of the heavenly pit. This meteor had broken the matrix formation that had sealed this world in one nick. And many of the ancient demon beasts had come out because of that. Someone is coming! Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his mouth and said. Both individuals promptly hid behind a broken rock. They held their breaths and hid their presence. Two black lights came streaking down from the sky a moment later, and burst into the heavenly pit. Yi Shiwen was still thinking who could have dared to come down here. After all, the meteor sect had already arrived. And only the Great Wei Empire's imperial clan had interest in this place apart from them. And their people had also arrived here. Other people were basically spectators. He heard the voice of the wood dragon. Yi Shiwen, those people belong to the Southern Dipper. Wood dragon's voice startled Yi Shiwen. He looked at those two black lights with full concentration. He saw two experts dressed in black robes inside the group of black fog. However, he couldn't see their appearance. The Southern Dipper. This was the first time Yi Shiwen had seen the members of the Southern Dipper. He desperately wanted to raise his foot and kick the wood dragon. His words had obviously come out as praise. However, Yi Shiwen had noticed what was wrong with this praise. How could he not have noticed the mockery in it? However, the experts of the meteor sect had already arrived earlier in large numbers. Then, the members of the Southern Dipper had appeared. Moreover, it wasn't clear who else would arrive later. Even the imperial clan of the Great Wei State wasn't their close friend either. To be continued. Chapter 516. Presently, they were in a situation where they were surrounded by enemies from all sides. Therefore, they must be careful in all aspects. They must advance gradually, and must fortify themselves at every step. They couldn't afford to relax even a bit. Yi Shiwen and the wood dragon didn't stay there any longer. They forged ahead since it wasn't clear who might arrive the next moment. They went ahead and discovered that ancient demon beasts were present everywhere. This was probably so because this ancient world had been isolated from the outside world since a long time. Corpses could be seen everywhere along the way they were headed in. Groups after groups of ancient demon beasts had been wiped out along the way. This must be the work of the people of the meteor sect, Yi Shiwen speculated. He also knew a bit about the working methods of the meteor sect. After all, that blood-red-clothed young master was a member of the meteor sect. In fact, he was a young lord of the meteor sect. These people had wiped out the ancient demon beasts rather quickly. They had crushed the demon beast tribes one by one. They had also taken away the demon cores, skins, and other valuable stuff. In fact, they hadn't left anything behind. Flutter, flutter! They came across a group of white snakes in the sky. They were surprised to see that each of these snakes was covered by fine snow-white scales from head to toe that were suffused with rays of light. There was a pair of long snow-white wings at the back of these snakes, and it was exceptionally beautiful to look at. However, each of those snakes opened their mouth wide like a sacrificial bowl, and rushed towards both of them. Each of them was approximately 4 to 5 meters long. These are flying snakes! Yi Shiwen recognized these white snakes. These were the ancient demon beasts that were mentioned in the ancient books. These so-called flying snakes were like the ones mentioned in the ancient legends. They didn't have feet, but they could fly since a pair of wings had grown on their ribs. Moreover, they excelled at puffing out smoke. So, they were similar to dragons in a way. These flying snakes had flourished in the ancient times. In fact, it was said that they were created by a great god, and they were pets of that god. However, there were only legends. In fact, the flying snakes had almost vanished from the world, and were quite rare as a result. Yi Shiwen had seen the records of these flying snakes in some ancient books. However, he hadn't expected that he would bump into these flying snakes right after he would arrive here. Damn it! These are strange and ancient beasts. The past of this ancient world seems very remote. The wood dragon was left dumbstruck. Those ancient demon beasts were ancient enough to be called ancient creatures. However, these flying snakes could be considered as old ancestors of those ancient demon beasts. They were extremely old creatures. These strange beasts used to be very famous in the remote past. These flying snakes had formed overwhelming layers of white clouds in the sky. In fact, even the demon beasts didn't dare to stop the flying snakes. These flying snakes saw Yi Shiwen. They considered him as a prey, and rushed towards him in overwhelming numbers. The expressions in the eyes of the wood dragon also looked firm. He knew that he couldn't dare to relax. These flying snakes were very powerful. They deserved to be called as ancient creatures. Most of them were sage realm beasts. And there were no less than thousands of flying snakes in this flock. They could easily pose a deadly threat for both individuals. The so-called a group of ants can also bite an elephant to death. There were many among them that were at the late stage of the sage realm. Moreover, there were several strong monsters that were at the peak of the sage realm. Clang! The wood dragon attacked first. His energy soared up and enveloped the surroundings. It strongly shook all directions. And an astonishing blade energy swept out to chop its targets. Poochie! Several flying snakes that were flying cheerfully were cut into two halves. You audacious mortal! Seems won't surrender without a fight! A loud shout came from the group of these flying snakes. Each of these flying snakes was moving in a sequence that resembled a marching battle formation. These flying snakes had already become mythical spirits with intelligence. In fact, people would have also believed that an army was marching if the appearance of each of these flying snakes were to be replaced by a human's. Moreover, many tyrannical and profound auras were hidden among these flying snakes. Even some looming auras of great sage realm could also be sensed among them. These auras belonged to the intrepid snakes of the half-step great sage realm. Poochie! Yi Shiwen's fire clouds falling sky hand grabbed several flying snakes and exploded them. The flesh and blood of a sage realm flying snake was very useful for cultivation. So, Yi Shiwen threw their entire bodies in the heavenly source mirror, and let Yi Mo absorb them. However, he didn't dare to delay any further. He prompted Wood Dragon. Hurry, let's get out of here! The Wood Dragon didn't dare to delay either, and he promptly followed Yi Shiwen and flew away. His voice hadn't even faded when a big hand suddenly swept down. And it smashed on the spot where these two individuals had been standing a moment ago. These flying snakes have genuinely become mythical spirits! The Wood Dragon looked horrified. These flying snakes looked like snakes. However, how could those dumb demon beasts be a match for them? They weren't on the same level. Basically, the more tyrannical the demon beasts were on an innate level, the more difficult it was for them to transform their appearances. The ordinary demon beasts of Truth Realm could transform their appearances very easily. However, those demon beasts were insignificant in comparison to demon beasts like these flying snakes. The flying snakes were ancient demon beasts. Moreover, they possessed a very high-level bloodline in their bodies. So, they were naturally very outstanding. However, one would be gravely mistaken to treat them as ordinary beasts even though they couldn't transform their appearances. Run! Yi Shiwen shouted. Neither of the two individuals dared to delay. However, those flying snakes were getting closer and closer behind them. These flying snakes excelled at puffing out smoke. They didn't have feet, but they could fly. So, each of these flying snakes had transformed into a silver light, and were chasing after them. The golden divinities suddenly condensed into a pair of wings on Yi Shiwen's back. He held the wood dragon and instantly covered a distance of more than a kilometer. Those flying snakes suddenly found themselves lagging far behind since he had opened up a huge gap in an instant. Yi Shiwen transformed into a golden streamer under several flapping of wings, and disappeared before the eyes of those flying snakes. The sounds of the loud roars of those flying snakes' ancestors echoed from behind them. "This is basically a shortened version of the ancient era," the wood dragon spoke up in a horrified tone. He had almost been eaten up by those flying snakes a moment ago. He might not have escaped from those flying snakes if Ishiwen hadn't carried him and escaped. Both of them rushed into the depths of the ancient world after they had reorganized a bit. And both of them had become extremely careful because of their recent experience. Time was passing steadily. In fact, 2 months' time had passed in a wink. Both of them were wandering inside this world seeking the whereabouts of the bereaved. They weren't looking for the information of bereaved just because of the Great Way State. After all, the Northern Dipper had also asked them to find the information of the bereaved once they had heard the news. Moreover, it was said that they might still send another senior expert to coordinate with these two individuals in finding the information. More forces had arrived at this place in the past 2 months. Even some of the deeply hidden sects of the secret world had also sent their experts. A rumor had gradually begun to circulate between those forces that had arrived. It was being said that this ancient world was actually the base station of a bereaved clan from the past. And that bereaved clan had left behind heavy treasures inside this base. This rumor had obviously made these forces excited. Moreover, it had attracted more and more experts. Someone had even said that they had seen great Sage Realm experts since they had also been attracted by this news. One must know that they were known as the bereaved race. However, the bereaved race was also divided into many different tribal groups at that time. So, they weren't the same tribal group at large. One could say that their various groups were different from each other, just as it was for the human race. It was said that this place was the ruins of a large bereaved clan. Therefore, it might have precious treasures of the bereaved race. There was a big difference between the divine tools of the bereaved and those of the human race. However, these exotic treasures were undoubtedly enough to attract a lot of experts. This rumor had made even more noise after the discovery of a palace's remnants by some people. Consequently, everyone had spread the rumor that a big ruin might have been discovered. Initially, the rumor that the bereaved had arrived here had attracted the experts of the younger generation. However, the older generation experts of some secret worlds had also begun to appear along with the emergence of these rumors. It has been confirmed by an expert of the older generation that there is a ruin here. And it may genuinely be the ruins of the bereaved clan. There may be some precious treasures as well. I don't know who will be able to get their hands on these treasures. Don't look at this as an opportunity since it might be an enormous disaster instead. After all, would it be good to provoke those bereaved? So much chaos had occurred in the past because of them. Who will be able to escape from the hands of these bereaved? Someone felt that this wasn't an opportunity. In fact, it could be a huge disaster. A bloodbath might take place if the bereaved were genuinely present there. How many people wanted to plunder the treasure of the bereaved? However, how many people would genuinely be able to achieve it? Those ancient demon beasts must be the spirit beasts that have been captured and confined here as guards in case those bereaved people are genuinely present here. Many of the legends label the bereaved race as barbarous and uncultured. However, one must admit the fact that those bereaved have also developed their own culture. I think the Meteor sect has the accurate information because the majority of the bereaved in the Meteor world had been suppressed by them. Maybe these ruins were sealed by them only. It's difficult to say, but they may have some information. This was the most widely circulated rumor. Many people had believed that the Meteor sect had the information of these ruins in their hands. Didn't everyone see that those people of the Meteor sect had arrived here first? Therefore, it might be possible that they had obtained some information, and had then arrived here so quickly. Yeah! It seems that the people of the Meteor sect may have the most accurate information if any exists in the first place. However, who will dare to follow them? A few people had tried to follow them without causing annoyance. But they were killed as a result. Some people had also believed that they could rely on their own strength to force information out of the people of the Meteor sect. But they had gotten slaughtered in the end. Chapter 5:17. News had transmitted after 2 months that a great sage expert had gone inside the depths of the heavenly crater. Apparently, he had found some clues, and was searching because of it. This had incited everyone even further. And more experts had arrived there and joined in the search. Yi Shiwen was straddling in a group of ancient demon beasts in a valley, and he was slaughtering them left and right. He appeared like a swaying catkin while doing so. He was facing a group of ancient mountain beasts draped in golden scales. Their bodies were extremely hard. They were roaring loudly. They all possessed earth-type magical power, and they had been unleashing this power upon Yi Shiwen. A massive rock fell from the sky, and it seemed that it would crush Yi Shiwen to death. Many of these ancient demon beasts were at the late stage of the semi-sage realm, but the majority of them were at the sage realm. Yi Shiwen looked like a swaying catkin among them. He had an iron sword in his hand. He was brandishing his iron sword like a dragon. He was relentless, and nothing could stop him. That falling rock hadn't even reached above his head when it was broken down by his sword light. It couldn't even get close to him. However, each of these ancient demon beasts possessed spiritual intelligence. Moreover, they seemed trained, just like professional soldiers. The rocks fell down from the sky in quick succession. In fact, they weren't even giving Yi Shiwen any time to catch his breath. There was an ancient tree behind Yi Shiwen. It was partially visible within a layer of golden energy that was fluctuating behind him. Of course, it was the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree. The Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree had shrouded Yi Zaiwen's body in its entirety. The bright look in his eyes glittered with clear-mindedness. There was no trace of impurity in it. This unclouded expression in his eyes under the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree was simply unprecedented. Yi Shiwen was launching attacks with a clear mind. Every sword attack was simple, just as the ones that were mentioned in the standard textbooks. He wasn't unleashing any gorgeous sword moves. However, even such ordinary sword strikes had stopped those falling rocks from approaching him. Yi Shiwen had found out that his moves had become smooth, ferocious, greatly efficiency, and very machine-like whenever he was shrouded by the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree. His might had also increased very significantly. He had concealed the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree inside his vital energies, and it was further covered by the dreadful divinities. So, an average person couldn't see the trace of the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree. These ancient demon beasts were his test objects. His iron sword suddenly issued a clang sound. It was just an ordinary iron sword. However, it looked like a legendary sword in his hands. In fact, it seemed that this sword could even cleave the heaven when he held it. Rumble! The sounds of explosions resounded unceasingly. Yi Zaiwen's long sword was issuing endless sword lights in the sky, and those falling rocks were being shattered into pieces at a very fast speed. Buried person sword and buried sword secrets were being displayed regularly. They had already reached a superb condition. Yi Shiwen strode on by taking the advantage of a gap he had just created. And his figure suddenly rushed out and stormed into that group of ancient demon beasts. Clang! Yi Shiwen brandished his iron sword. The sword light formed an ice-cold black light. Then, it shot out several sword strikes in an instant. The bodies of those ancient mountain beasts were incredibly hard since they were draped in armors. It was difficult to injure them, even with a divine weapon. However, they were nothing in front of Yi Zaiwen's iron sword. Blood splashed out wherever the sword light fell. The beasts appeared to be made up of paper as they got ravaged by those iron sword strikes. Moreover, those sword attacks had accurately struck the vital points of these demon beasts. Each of these demon beasts was more 3 meters tall. They were even taller than Yi Shiwen. However, how they could be a match for him? He shuttled among those demon beasts as if he was strolling in a courtyard. Those mountain beasts roared and collapsed one after another wherever he went. They were no match for him. Hundreds of beasts had been killed by him within the blink of an eye. He looked like the god of death for a moment because he was causing deaths wherever he was going. These demon beasts weren't weak. However, they were being slaughtered by Yi Zaiwen's sword moves because he was extremely powerful. Each move was precise to an incredible degree. His attacks was even more formidable than before. In fact, Yishuan felt that his inner realm had just made a breakthrough, and had entered another realm. He had previously walked on a road that had required great skills, but not much labor. His every sword attack used to have crushing power. It could crush anyone who stood in its front. This was the so-called lifting heavy weight as if it's light. A small mountain appeared as light as a feather in his hands. He could crush it while laughing and talking. However, it was different now. His sword play looked even more ordinary. But its power hadn't dropped even a bit. Even a mountain beast of peak sage realm couldn't stop one move of his. He didn't even need to use another move, and could kill the demon beast on the spot in one move alone. Perhaps this should be called lifting lightweight as if heavy instead of the other way round. He could crush many enemies even if he had a large feather in his hand. This was a new realm in its own. It seemed as if he had suddenly attained enlightenment. He had reached an entirely different realm altogether. The inner realm and the realm of strength were entirely different things on the path of martial arts. One couldn't turn back once they had attained a high realm of strength and gotten stronger. However, inner realm of martial arts was completely different from this. One could enter another realm only if they had comprehended the previous one thoroughly. Otherwise, one might return to the previous realm of lifting heavy weight as if it's light at any time. He still needed to practice a lot to strengthen his new realm under the lifting light weight as if it's heavy situation. And he would be able to freely switch things around when he would get a complete hold of both lifting heavy weight as if it's light and lifting light weight as if it's heavy realms. This was the so-called degree of control of one's mind, because the mind would interpret something heavy as light as a feather in one moment, and something light as a giant mountain in the other. It was truly a confusing and complicated concept. However, Yishuan had already entered this realm now. So, his frame of mind had become very clear. Moreover, he clearly knew that this had happened with the support of the enlightening mind ancient tree. It wasn't surprising that many people had fought over the enlightening mind ancient tree since the ancient times. He only had a branch of the enlightening mind ancient tree. It had surely begun to grow back. But it wasn't clear how long it would take for the entire tree to grow up. One could advance by leaps and bounds if one could meditate under a complete enlightening mind ancient tree even for a day. In fact, one could make skyrocketing progress at that time. However, it wasn't clear how much he would have grown up by the time the enlightening mind ancient tree would grow back to its stage of maturity. A scarlet mirror flew out of Yizaiwen's body. And those demon beasts that had been killed by him were immediately absorbed by the heavenly source mirror wherever the scarlet light went. Clang! 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 The iron sword issued clang sounds. Yishuan freely brandished his sword in quick succession, and the attacks unleashed unimaginable power. A large number of demon beasts were killed again, and their flesh was absorbed by the heavenly source mirror wherever the sword light went. This would obviously be used for Yumo's recovery later on. Yumo's condition had become much better. He had also woken up once in these 2 months. However, he had landed into deep sleep quite soon after that. Yishuan finally managed to kill these demon beasts after having fought them for half a day. He had also managed to produce the ideal condition of lifting light weight as if it's heavy concept this time. He could have entered this realm without the support of the enlightening mind ancient tree. However, it would have been difficult. Moreover, it wouldn't have been a smooth process. He knew that he had reached his present limit. It didn't matter how skillful he was. He needed time to enter this realm. It was similar to the case when he had taken a lot of time to enter the lifting heavy weight as if it's light realm. Moreover, the thing that had made him the most happy was that his strength was showing signs of making a breakthrough after he had faintly started to feel the lifting light weight as if it's heavy realm. He felt that his strength would soon make the breakthrough into the intermediate stage of the sage realm. It hadn't even been half a year since he had entered the initial stage of the sage realm. However, it was no big deal for him. His accumulation was extremely profound. An ordinary person must pay attention towards consolidating their realm once they had made a breakthrough. And they also required time for doing that. However, he was different. His foundation was very strong. An ordinary person required time for consolidating their realm. However, this time could be enormously shortened in his case, just like the wood dragons. The wood dragon had just reached the late stage of the sage realm a while ago. However, he was almost about to enter the peak stage of sage realm now. It was hard to say how many adventures these Heaven's Pride level experts had come across. But it was evident that they had obtained many more special methods than ordinary people. Therefore, it was only obvious that they couldn't be treated as ordinary people. However, Yi Zaiwen's foundation was more profound as compared to that of the wood dragons. The wood dragon had also said that he had never seen such a profound foundation as that of Yi Zaiwen's. In fact, it could scare a person to death. However, he didn't know that this rich accumulation had been acquired back when Yi Shiwen was at half-step Legendary's realm. And it had only come to manifest to its true extent in his current foundation. He had built this unprecedented and incomparably strong foundation in order to cross that terrifying sage realm heavenly tribulation. How could an ordinary person think to such extent? However, this wasn't the time for closed-door training because he didn't have anyone by his side for protection. The wood dragon had already left him and gone to meet that great sage expert the Northern Dipper had sent. Yi Shiwen had also gone about his own way. He would join them when the time would be right. Yi Shiwen had only dared to bring out the enlightening mind ancient tree because the wood dragon wasn't present there. Otherwise, it would have been dangerous if the wood dragon had recognized it. And Yi Shiwen couldn't dare to take this risk, not at this time at least. He and the wood dragon were partners. However, one can't tell what's going on in the other person's heart. He knew that a group of great sage experts would swarm in if the news that he had a treasure like the enlightening mind ancient tree got transmitted. Yi Shiwen went inside the lair of those mountain beasts after he had killed them. It was a cave that curved down into the ground. He also killed the remaining beasts one by one on his way. He walked for a quarter of an hour or so, and arrived at the bottom of the passage. He then saw a huge cavern at the bottom. Yellow-colored spirit crystals were present all around the cave. The so-called spirit crystal was a pure natural crystal that was condensed from the spirit energies. It wasn't like the spirit stone because a spirit stone was formed after a stone had gone through eternal polishing by the spirit energies. Furthermore, it would even have to absorb the spirit energies after that. Therefore, the spirit stone contained many impurities inside. However, these spirit crystals were different. They were pure and natural crystals that were entirely condensed from the spirit energies alone. So, they were very pure in their make, and could be absorbed directly. These treasures could often be found inside the caves that were formed innumerable years ago. It wasn't surprising that these mountain beasts were so powerful. After all, they had been thriving on so many spirit crystals. These spirit crystals were much purer than ordinary primary spirit dawn. In fact, one piece of spirit crystal could be exchanged for more than 100 primary spirit dawn. However, the fact is that only the experts of the Great Sage realm and above could condense primary spirit dawn, and that too up to some purity. Yi Zaiwen's initial estimate suggested that this room full of spirit crystals could approximately be exchanged for 1 billion primary spirit dawn. It could be said that he had become rich overnight. He would skyrocket in one fell swoop in case he managed to obtain so much wealth. To be continued. Chapter 518. Yi Shiwen waved his hand, collected these spirit crystals, and put them inside the heavenly source mirror. These spirit crystals were the protective barrier with the help of which those mountain beasts had been flourishing. However, they had fallen into Yi Zaiwen's hands now. It could be said that one spirit crystal could be exchanged for 100 primary spirit dawn. In fact, one could get an even higher number of primary spirit dawn if they exchanged it in the black market. However, he didn't wish to exchange these spirit crystals. Spirit crystals could be exchanged for primary spirit dawn with ease. However, it was difficult to exchange primary spirit dawn for the spirit crystals. Yi Shiwen must find a place to absorb these spirit crystals. And his cultivation would perhaps attain a brand new progress once that had happened. Yi Shiwen had barely emerged from the underground cave when energy fluctuations appeared in the sky. and it was accompanied by the emergence of a flying fire meteor that illuminated half of the horizon. They were the meteor sex people. Yi Shiwen immediately restrained his breath, and he operated the restraining breath technique to its capacity. His entire body sank into the subspace, and got concealed therein. In fact, he didn't even set off any fluctuations in this process. His restraining breath technique had reached at a new realm once he had entered the sage realm. Consequently, even a great sage expert would find it difficult to discover him once he had concealed his presence. Of course, this was subject to the condition that he mustn't move. Therefore, he was confident that a sage expert couldn't discover his existence by any means. He didn't need to worry about being discovered unless his presence had been locked on to by the enemies. The flying fire meteor had already reached above Yi Shiwen within a few breaths. He swept out his divine sense, and found a few familiar faces on that flying fire meteor. The Great Wei Empire's second prince and third prince were present along with their subordinates. He had seen them separating from each other beforehand. However, they had somehow gathered together at this time. A young man was standing at the top of the flying fire meteor. He was tall and handsome. His outstanding aura was quite threatening. He was dressed in the meteor sex standard uniform. However, he had a special air about him. The flying fire meteor came to a halt in front of the underground cave of the mountain beasts. Everyone got down from it, and swept their glances over the entire place. The third prince spoke up somewhat remorsefully. "We are late. He has escaped. I didn't expect that this dragon master would be so sly. He's one slippery bastard. I think he's a poisonous snake. A viper that can bite you anywhere and any time." The second prince opened his mouth and said. In fact, he had said this as he had looked towards that young man who was standing in front of everyone and seemed like the leader of this group. "Has someone from our side leaked the news, and allowed him to get away?" A prince's consecrate opened his mouth and speculated. "It's impossible. We had departed at the same time, and now we have gathered together. So, he couldn't have obtained news, let alone escape in advance," the third prince denied and said. They had planned to deal with Yi Shiwen from the get-go. It had seemed that they had scattered when they had departed. However, they had gathered together soon after that. Therefore, nobody here could say that the news might have gotten leaked. They had been pursuing Yi Shiwen since the last few months. And they had finally obtained the news of him being present in this vicinity with great difficulty. Therefore, they had rushed straight here. However, it seemed that Yi Shiwen hadn't left long ago. "Look at this mess. It's obvious that this dragon master has left recently. Moreover, it doesn't appear like he has left in a hurry after getting the news. I can only say that this guy's luck is very good. He must left very recently from the looks of it. So, shouldn't we purse him?" someone asked. Yi Shiwen had now understood that why these experts of the Great Wei State's imperial clan had left so quickly at that time. They had been planning to deal with him. Moreover, they had also brought the experts of the meteor sect along with them. That young man's imposing aura was suppressive and threatening. He looked suave and outgoing. He had already entered the small perfection level of the sage realm. So, he was a step ahead of the peak level of the sage realm. Each martial art move of the peak level of the sage realm has a standard style as per the comparison based on the practice moves. But these different styles can be linked up together in order in the case of small perfection level of the sage realm. So, there wouldn't be any gap in between the moves as a result of this linking. And this meant that there was a big power gap between the two realms. Furthermore, one could easily use these styles in an unorganized sequence once they had reached the great perfection level of the sage realm. One could disrupt the order of these moves. And one wouldn't need to adhere to the sequence of the styles. Therefore, the experts of sage great perfection realm could unleash these moves at will, and without following any order. Consequently, they could cast a move at the time of unleashing the attack, but that move could get transformed into some other move when the attack would finally get materialized. The sage small perfection realm was more incredible than the sage peak realm. In fact, these two realms were almost entirely at different levels. "There's no need. He's just a small fish, and nothing more," He can't stir up mighty waves in the sea, the young man said disdainfully. It was obvious that he didn't give a damn about Yishiwen. Many senior experts of our meteor sect have arrived. So, what's he? He's nothing. You don't need to worry. Of course. Of course, you are right, brother Xingfeiyue. That Dragon Master isn't an issue for a talented man like you. I only suspect that those two belong to some organization. And they might secretly wish to topple the rule of our meteor sect, the second prince said. He had hit the nail on the head. He had harbored doubts about the origins of Yishiwen and the wood dragons since the beginning. After all, he hadn't been able to find anything about the backgrounds of both these individuals. And this was the most dreadful thing for him. I will go and report this matter to the higher-ups. The sect will investigate and find the origins of both these individuals. This is our meteor sect's domain. It's ridiculous if they think that they can topple our meteor sect's rule. They think too highly of themselves if they are embracing such a notion. They are overconfident. Xingfeiyu's face exposed a disdainful smile. His confidence had originated from the formidable strength of the meteor sect. They had been ruling the meteor world since countless years. Moreover, they hadn't declined even once, unlike the true Martial University. The meteor world was their territory. Therefore, he believed that those two were thinking too highly of themselves if they thought that they could topple their rule in their backyard. They were overreaching themselves. A mysterious light suddenly flashed in Yi Zaiwen's eyes. The Northern Dipper's objective wasn't to topple the meteor sect's rule. The Northern Dipper had tyrannical strength. However, they had a very few personnel in their ranks. So, their combined strength was far from rivaling that of the meteor sects. Therefore, they wouldn't go for a head-on confrontation with the meteor sect by attempting to topple their rule. However, this matter was tied to planting a Northern Dipper saboteur in the meteor sect. It wasn't clear when this saboteur would prove his usefulness. After all, Yishiwen didn't even know how many such saboteurs the Northern Dipper commanded. However, the 23rd Prince was very important for Yishiwen since this would be his first base of operation for obtaining resources from the Great Wei Empire at a steady rate. This obviously wouldn't satisfy his ever-increasing requirement of resources. However, it would still be a steady source of income for him. Therefore, the consequences would be disastrous for Yishiwen if he ended up attracting the attention of a sect as enormous as the meteor sect. After all, the meteor sect had been ruling the meteor world for so many years. So, they wouldn't show any mercy if someone tried to topple their rule. Therefore, he couldn't allow them to spread this news. And this meant that he would need to annihilate the sources of the news before that. That Dragon Master is only an irksome fly, nothing more. He's nothing. They aren't a match for our meteor sect, Xingfeiyue said. Yishiwen and his trusted aide could prove to be a big trouble for the second prince. However, they were nothing for him. He had such belief and confidence, and he also had the strength to back it up. Moreover, he was also confident that Yishiwen would be a mere peak-level expert of the Sage realm at most. However, he himself had already entered the Sage Small Perfection realm. Therefore, he would crush Yishiwen to death if the latter dared to appear. This ancient world was once the headquarters of the deceased bereaved clan. So, this place has countless precious treasures. My cultivation will advance by leaps and bounds as long as I obtain even one of these ancient treasures. Won't I be able to suppress that Dragon Master at that time as well? So, what if he is a great master of alchemy? I will crush him to death with ease. Xingfeiyue coldly said. Xingfeiyue sat down on the flying fire meteor after he said this. Then, he urged to fly forward. It transformed into a grandiose streamer of light, and disappeared in the horizon. Yishiwen came out of the void. His pupils contracted, and a cold intention flickered in his eyes. A pair of golden wings suddenly appeared on his back. He then opened his wings, transformed into a golden streamer, and chased after them at a speed that was even quicker than theirs. He didn't have a divine flying tool like the flying fire meteor. However, his devil wings were an extremely powerful magical ability in their own merit. In fact, he could even travel back and forth between myriads of worlds once it had been practiced to the pinnacle. This was the strongest aspect of the devil wings. Yi Shiwen caught up with Xing Feiyue and other people soon enough. However, he didn't act rashly, and didn't alert them of his presence. Instead, he decided to hang behind them. He had restrained his breath with the help of restraining breath technique. And he was outside their line of sight. Moreover, he was using his divine sense to examine their actions. However, they couldn't discover his presence. Xing Feiyue was driving the flying fire meteor. So, he was in the front. He had attracted the attentions of many demon beasts en route. However, how could those ancient demon beasts be a match for him? They had obviously been crushed by these people. Yi Shiwen was steadily pursuing them. And a blur silhouette of the enlightening mind ancient tree was present behind him. Consequently, he had never been so clear-headed. He was pursuing Xing Feiyue and the others on the one hand. And he was undergoing practice on the other. In fact, he felt that his cultivation was already at a critical juncture. He felt that he would reach the intermediate stage of the sage realm if he could make another breakthrough at this time. His fighting strength could be compared to that of an expert of the sage small perfection realm once that had happened. And then, he could blow up this arrogant Xing Feiyue with a single punch. He just needed to wait. The look in Yi Ziwen's eyes was charged by thousands kinds of tricks. All kinds of plans and schemes had appeared in his mind one by one. His attitude had become unprecedentedly peaceful under the effect of the enlightening mind ancient tree. His killing intention had certainly become stronger with the passage of time. However, that hadn't had the slightest of effect on his rational mind. So, he could still think of all sorts of schemes in a calm manner. Time passed day by day. And it had soon been more than a month ever since Yi Shiwen had started to pursue Xing Feiyue and the others. Xing Feiyue and the others had gone on expeditions in all directions in this more than a month's time. And they had also come across dangers several times. However, they had escaped all dangers. They had also obtained many benefits during this time. They had already ventured deep into the underground world of the heavenly pit by now. They had also come across increasingly powerful ancient demon beasts, as they had gone farther into the depths of this underground world. Many of those demon beasts had attained spiritual intelligence, and had established their own ancient demon beast kingdoms. And that too in perfect order. Yi Shiwen had been amazed at the sight of this. Everyone had arrived in front of a huge mountain at this time. There's something wrong about this huge mountain. I think it's a massive ancient demon beast. To be continued. Chapter 519. Everyone was surprised to see this gigantic mountain when they arrived in front of it. They noticed that it was a mountain range that had stretched up to more than 1,000 kilometers. In fact, it was so huge that they couldn't see its boundary. There's something wrong about this huge mountain. Wait, this is a huge ancient beast, the second prince exclaimed on top of the flying fire meteor. He had realized that this wasn't a huge mountain. Instead, it was the corpse of an incomparably huge ancient demon beast. The corpse of this ancient demon beast had gotten covered with layers of dust with the passage of time. Thus, it had eventually formed such a huge sierra. It was covered with layers of dust, and had passed through countless years of transformation. However, everyone quickly found out that this was a beast's corpse once they calmed down. They swept their divine senses through the layers of dust, and saw that there was a gigantic beast under that cover of earth. Its entire body was covered with ice-cold black scales. Moreover, it seemed as if molten iron had poured out from its body, and had then submerged into the dust. And so, that huge body had taken the form of an endless mountain range. Many ancient demon beasts were living on top of that mountain. They were surviving with the support of this giant creature's corpse. Moreover, its blood essence had already condensed into crystal stones. It's such a giant creature. It shouldn't be in hibernation, right? The third prince asked skeptically. He had swept out his divine sense. However, he could still feel its looming coercion. Moreover, its corpse didn't seem to have decayed. In fact, it still looked vivid and alive. His entire body stretched tightly. He was afraid that the awakening of this giant creature would lead to a terrible battle. One must know that this wasn't his assumption. Instead, it was possibly a disaster waiting to happen. In fact, it wasn't impossible by any means. These mega-sized creatures were different from the human race. After all, the human race had a short lifespan. However, some inborn giant creatures were similar to dragon race and so on. They had a lifespan of several thousand years. And such great lifespans meant that their life was simply endless. They could live for way too long before they died. They possessed outstanding innate talent and noble bloodline. So, they could reach to a very profound realm during the innumerable years of their lives, even if they didn't practice. On the contrary, the human race had to work hard and cultivate with their entire strength in order to obtain a very long lifespan. One could even say that these giant creatures were the true heaven's favored ones. Sleeping was a very good way to kill endless time. The human race had to strive to cultivate in order to reach to a particular realm. However, these creatures could automatically arrive at that realm by taking a nap. Anyone would become incomparably jealous by looking at such natural talent. This could also be the case with this colossus. After all, it might have become a mountain range after being in hibernation for thousands of years. Therefore, it would be a dreadful disaster if this giant creature was to be woken up. "He's already dead," Xing Feiyue concluded. He had relaxed after he had confirmed that this colossus was dead. After all, he had also been afraid of what could have happened if this creature was suddenly awakened. "There's a huge empty wound on its head." Everyone looked in the direction in which Xing Feiyue had pointed his finger. Everyone then saw a huge hole at the peak of this huge mountain range. Streams of red water were splashing out of it from time to time. Everyone held their breath. It wasn't clear when this colossus had died. However, it was still bleeding. Moreover, it didn't seem like its body had decayed. So, it was evident that this colossus must have been very powerful. However, the thing that had alarmed him even more was the fact that such a formidable colossus had been killed by someone in one stroke. He could guess that this colossus hadn't even been able to fight back. Therefore, it was possible that it may have died in one shot. Moreover, there weren't any traces of superficial scars on its body either. That person must have been insanely powerful. "This is a star colossus!" Yi Shiwen had recognized it in a second. There was a faintly looming star power around it. So, it was obviously a star colossus. What else could it have been? Most importantly, it hailed from the tribe of that star colossus that was sealed inside his heavenly source mirror. Star colossuses had many tribes. It wasn't that they were a single race. However, they usually kept to themselves. They would rarely come together. Yi Shiwen entered the heavenly source mirror as he realized this. That star colossus had already become motionless in the blood pool. After all, it wasn't its real body. It was only a wisp of its soul. Therefore, there was no power left inside it since Yi Shiwen had unceasingly been extracting its power. Yi Zaiwen's blood slave was quietly waiting on the other side. This blood slave had unconsciously made the breakthrough to the peak of the sage realm. The power that had been extracted from the body of the star colossus had been entirely absorbed by the blood slave. Therefore, the blood slave had promoted at a brisk pace, while the star colossus had become more and more dispirited. This star colossus was at half-step great sage realm. However, it still didn't have any way while facing the unending extraction of its vitality. It hadn't anticipated that it would fall into Yi Zaiwen's hand when it was plotting against him. After all, Yi Shiwen hadn't even reached the semi-sage realm at that time. In fact, he had merely been at the half-step legendary realm. Yi Shiwen would have a half-step great sage realm helper by his side by the time this star colossus' entire vitality was absorbed by the blood slave. And nobody below the great sage realm would be able to deal with him when that happens. "Yi Shiwen, you'll die a dog's death!" The star colossus roared as soon as Yi Shiwen came inside. But he had long been weak. The chains of the talisman that had shackled his body were still absorbing his vitality. "Die miserably? Why you would have been in this situation if you hadn't plotted against me? Yi Shiwen smirked. He had anticipated that he had no way to destroy the magic seed inside his body because of this star colossus. He had surely put his entire effort into suppressing it. However, the magic seed was still gradually maturing, and it could pose a huge threat to him one day. In fact, it wouldn't be pretty if he were to die under the influence of the magic seed. Practicing Heart Seed Devil method was like dying 10 times without giving birth again. It was a method used for controlling other people. Yi Shiwen had that magic seed planted inside his body, and he had been surviving it so far. However, it was like a sharp sword that was hanging above his head, and it could fall at any time. In fact, it wasn't even known when it would fall. However, it would certainly be a dead end if it fell. He could only improve his cultivation in order to suppress the growth of the magic seed. He would get an opportunity to live on if this magic seed broke. Moreover, his martial power would increase drastically if that were to happen. However, he would die miserably if he couldn't survive it. However, he didn't have any other choice at this time. That thing lying over there should be from your race. Yi Shiwen loosened the star colossus seals so that it could see outside. How's this possible? The star colossus couldn't believe its eyes. However, it hadn't mistaken that familiar aura. They were similar star colossuses. However, they hadn't met frequently. In fact, they might not have seen anyone of their race in their entire lifetime. However, that wound was even more frightening. It seemed as if someone had attacked from the sky with a spear, and had nailed it to death. It was hard to express in words how ferocious the killer would have been. Ha ha ha, God is really helping me. The corpse of such a colossus is infinitely precious. Ha ha ha! It seems that God has destined me, Xing Feiyue, to rise to the peak. Xing Feiyue's eyes suddenly glittered as he glanced over it. He wouldn't have dared to provoke a living colossus. However, a dead one couldn't pose any threat to him. On the contrary, it was a huge treasure for him. Xing Feiyue immediately drove the flying fire meteor down. However, several hundred giant apes suddenly jumped out from the endless forest that was on that mountain range before they could land on it. Their entire bodies were emitting silver rays of light, and their faces looked fierce. Many exceptionally vicious Sage Realm apes were also present among these huge apes. Most of them had already arrived in front of these people, and had launched attacks with their fists. Moreover, their fist technique looked smooth. In fact, their fists even issued whistling sounds. These giant apes have already become sentient. Their fist technique is so smooth and relaxed. It isn't inferior to that of the great masters of human race who've been immersed in practicing fist techniques for many years, Yi Shiwen remarked. Where have they learnt this from? Is it their innate magical skill? Martial arts cultivators used to focus on a particular martial heritage. Those who didn't have any dedicated heritage were called random cultivators with no background. People often wouldn't pay attention to such people because it was quite difficult to become powerful if one didn't have a heritage. However, where had these silver giant apes learned this fist technique from? Is it because they are related to the bloodline of this star colossus? Yi Shiwen secretly guessed. The demon beasts on this mountain were perhaps born with the bloodline of this star colossus. They were visibly different from the ordinary demon beasts. In fact, this case was similar to how the star beasts in the foreign battlefield had taken birth with the bloodline of that sealed star colossus. These giant apes rushed forward. Consecrates of a few princes didn't even get the time to react, and were killed by the fist attacks of the giant apes. Audacious evil beasts! Xing Feiyue finally moved into action. His entire energy soared into the sky. He didn't say anything else as he stretched out a big hand. A blue light suddenly spread across the entire sky. And the blue light that had emitted from his palm formed a huge net in the sky. The swift giant apes that were approaching at fast speed bumped into that huge net, and got pierced by the blue lights. They screamed, and fell down from the sky. Xing Feiyue had displayed the true might of the Sage Small Perfection realm. A silver giant ape suddenly roared at this time. It came out flying from inside the mountain. This silver giant ape was nearly twice as tall as the other giant apes. It launched a long-range raid. It seemed as if a small mountain was rolling over with loud bangs. Many stars were revolving around it. They were a representation of its star power. Its imposing aura was earth-shattering. After all, it was a demon beast of sage small perfection realm. It was the leader of these silver giant apes. And it was very powerful. This leader of the silver giant apes suddenly roared loudly, and the noise shook the sky. The silver star power on its body looked incredible. It issued tyrannical aura as its fist swept out towards Xingfeiyue. In fact, the sounds of its bellows were similar to that of a devil god. The space was shattered into pieces by the fist's pressure. Rumble! Xingfeiyue clashed with the leader of silver giant apes. And the result was earth-shattering. The remaining experts of the Great Wei Empire also began to fight with those other silver giant apes. Now is my chance! Yi Zaiwen's eyes lit up. He fluttered his golden wings. He took a detour towards the back of the mountain, and landed there. To be continued. Chapter 520. The front side of this mountain range had already been damaged very severely. However, these cracks on the mountain range were only constricted to the range of a dozen kilometers. They hadn't continued to proliferate any further. In fact, it seemed that a mysterious force was constricting the cracks from proliferating. This was the work of the principle of this star colossus. It that had automatically protected its body. This incredible star colossus still possessed amazing power even though it had been dead for countless years. Yi Shiwen swept his gaze. There weren't any other creatures present on top of this mountain. Only the star beasts that had born with the bloodline of this star colossus were present on the mountain. Other ancient demon beasts couldn't come near this mountain. They had been repelled by that inexplicable coercion. Yi Shiwen had barely approached the mountain range when he felt an overwhelming suppressive force pressing down upon him. His golden divinities automatically covered his entire body as a result, and resisted that huge suppressive force. Yi Shiwen walked on the mountain and arrived at that huge wound. Small pools of blood were flowing inside the wound at all times. Yi Shiwen jumped inside the wound. This was an extremely long passage. He could even feel that this star colossus body still had the vitality. It didn't seem that it had died several years ago. Its ferocious body would have made it extremely difficult to kill it if its mind hadn't been extinguished by that strike. Its blood still contained huge amounts of energy. It wasn't surprising that those silver giant apes possessed extraordinary strength. Yi Shiwen went ahead walking along that huge wound. He could still hear the thumping heartbeats that were transmitting the blood in all parts of its body. Yi Shiwen transformed into a golden streamer, and flew inside the body of this star colossus. He saw a planet inside its body some time later. It was revolving, and a section of universe had taken shape around it. This was a piece of universe. This star colossus had actually quenched a planet inside its inner core. And it had used the star power from that planet as the driving force for its own body. No wonder that these star colossuses were so powerful that it was hard to find a match for them. The true Martial University had been compelled to collapse by a star colossus in its most prosperous times. However, this star colossus' vitality hadn't gone down after its death. That's because its soul had been annihilated, but the star core was still preserved. Therefore, this huge body hadn't decayed since it had been supported by a steady stream of star power. After all, this star colossus wasn't immortal in reality. Its body had only appeared immortal for countless years because of this nucleus that was unceasingly producing star power. It's hard to imagine the strength of the man who killed this huge monster. Yi Shiwen had no choice but to admire. This world had many people whose strength was beyond his very comprehension. However, he became excited soon after. He had always been worried about his future progress because he had started his journey late when compared to his peers. After all, that kid Peng Yangbo had become a Heaven's Pride expert, and had advanced to the semi-sage realm at the age of 10 years. However, Yi Shiwen had merely entered the Hotian realm when he was 11 or 12 years old. He had surely put his entire effort to reduce this disparity in the future. And his cultivation realm had also advanced quite quickly. However, there had been a big disparity from the beginning. And he couldn't ignore this disparity anyhow. He needed to advance quicker than those other Heaven's Pride experts in order to catch up. However, this would undoubtedly make his foundation unstable. This wasn't a joke. What would be the long-term prospect of a tall building with an unstable foundation? It might collapse at any time. He knew about this matter more than anyone else since it was more important to him than it was to others. Therefore, he had always attached special importance to this matter. He had always made the preparations before he would make a breakthrough. He would obviously do this to make his foundation safer and better. However, it required the support of countless spirit energies. The realm was like the blueprint of a tall building. He could deduce it with the help of his mysterious space. However, he couldn't construct the building without the help of the raw materials. He had nearly consumed the resources he had obtained by winning the four-sex martial arts competition. And now this huge star core had fallen upon him like an enormous pie. Moreover, it was much easier to absorb it than the primary spirit dawn. Yishuan didn't hesitate. He promptly laid out a barrier formation inside the body of this colossus. After that, he began his closed-door training. He put his entire effort, and didn't stop for even a bit. The observing person's scripture was operating crazily, it didn't stop for even a moment. The small universe in his body was also revolving frantically. The star core issued buzzing sound like a spinning cocoon since its star power was being extracted little by little. It was obviously being absorbed by Yi Zaiwen's body. This endless star power was a big supplement for him. He didn't even need to convert this energy. He must obtain the support of more and more star power if he wanted to expand the universe that was inside his body. The star power gradually entered his small universe. His small universe had also begun to expand inch by inch. Yi Zaiwen's small solar system had taken shape after he had entered the Sage realm. It could now function independently. In fact, it could even produce star power which could further expand his universe. However, its speed was very slow. In fact, forming a proper universe still looked far-fetched. He would need to draw support from this solar system for several hundred years or 1,000 years, or even more than that to make that happen. However, this star core had enormously accelerated this process. He gradually reached closer to making the breakthrough under the influence of the surging star power. He looked like a real god sitting upright in the universe and chanting sutras from ancient scriptures. He was sitting upright under the enlightening mind ancient tree. The enlightening mind ancient tree was glowing silver under the shower of the star power. It gradually drooped upon his body, and shrouded it in its entirety. A page of the ancient scripture emitted a dazzling golden beam above Yi Zaiwen's head. It seemed like this chant had existed since ancient times. Yishuan knew that time was running out. Xing Feiyue might defeat those star beasts anytime. And then, he would rush inside as well. Therefore, Yishuan needed to make the breakthrough before Xing Feiyue arrived here. Else, he would have no other choice but to escape in distress. He had decided to use all his methods in order to make the breakthrough within a short time. He had taken out the enlightening mind ancient tree, and had also used that page of the ancient god scripture along with it. This page of ancient god scripture wasn't some incredible secret method or anything. However, it was like the most profound recorded principle in the world. He would gain some benefits every time he had read it. And this resulted in a long-term gain. It might seem like he hadn't made a huge progress if one were to look after a short period of time. However, the accumulation over a long period of time would eventually turn into a very big profit. The fifth god's cultivation speed had been very quick. And this page of ancient god scripture had played a big role in that. You beasts are acting very recklessly. Xing Feiyue repelled an attack from the leader of those silver giant apes. I know your intelligence isn't inferior to that of humans. You should have surrendered to me earlier, and I would have spared all you mountain spirit beasts in return. However, you are following the path of your own doom now. So, I will kill all of you at once. Xing Feiyue had become somewhat impatient. He would have spared the lives of these silver giant apes if they had surrendered in the beginning. And he would have made them his slaves after that. However, he had already lost his patience by now. The dead body of this unknown colossus had attracted his desire beyond any known limits. So, he couldn't wait anymore. "Arrogant human!" the leader of the silver giant apes roared. An invisible force suddenly rushed out from the top of its head. It seemed as if a godly ape was standing between the heaven and the earth. It felt as if its domineering presence could scare the gods and devil into submission. "Someone like you doesn't stand a chance," Xing Feiyue sneered. A dreadful magical power suddenly pressed down from above. A palace suddenly appeared from the void. It issued waves of sage power as it fell down from the sky. It was a sage tool in reality. Xing Feiyue had condensed the palace where he lived into a sage tool. It possessed endless might, and could be transported anywhere and any time via a portal. Rumble! The palace grew bigger and bigger as it swept towards that giant ape leader to crush it. The entire world broke down into pieces. Cracks appeared in the space as if it was a mirror. They then proliferated across the entire horizon like a spider web. The legs of that leader of the silver giant apes suddenly broke down, and it fell to its knees. Its martial power was far inferior to that of a Heaven's Pride expert like Xing Feiyue, who had been practicing since several hundred years. Moreover, Xing Feiyue's strength had increased very greatly since he had taken out a sage tool. "Beasts will always be beasts. I had given you a chance to live, but you didn't take that." A sinister look appeared on Xing Feiyue's face. Endless divine beams emitted from the palm of his big hand. The divine beams got interweaved, formed a huge net of light, and advanced towards that leader of the silver giant apes to shroud and crush it. Bang! That leader of the silver giant apes was trapped by the large light net of Xing Feiyue's. It then exploded in the sky and transformed into a mass of blood fog. The other silver giant apes scattered in panic when they saw that their leader had been killed. However, how could they have escaped from the hands of Xing Feiyue? They were annihilated one by one. Xing Feiyue jumped onto the mountain after he had killed those silver giant apes. He faced upwards and burst into laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha, God is favoring me. This colossus obviously has an extraordinary origin. Even its dead body is an astronomical wealth. Ha 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 ha. Congratulations, senior brother Xing. You will become invincible throughout all the generations." The other princes and their subordinates clapped for Xing Feiyue and praised him in flattery. They enjoyed a noble status in the Great Wei State. However, they knew that they were nothing in front of Xing Feiyue. The Great Wei State undoubtedly possessed outstanding national strength. However, even dozens of such Great Wei States were nothing in front of the Meteor sect. These people could act domineeringly in the Great Wei State. However, they were nothing when it came to the bigger picture of the Meteor world. In fact, they were far inferior to Meteor sect's powerful core disciple like Xing Feiyue. They could only fawn over him when in his presence. Rumble! Xing Feiyue was still feeling pleased with himself when the energy of the entire world suddenly congealed together. Countless spirit energies suddenly came whistling towards the mountain range. Then, a powerful aura erupted from the mountain. Xing Feiyue's complexion had darkened. Someone had beaten him to a punch. To be continued. Chapter 521. Xing Feiyue saw this, and became angry. He had realized that someone had taken advantage of the distraction his fight had created. And this person had then drilled their way inside. Damn it! This opportunistic son of a bit *H has dared to take advantage of the distraction to go inside. Xing Feiyue roared. He stretched his big hand, and it emitted endless rays of light. They then transformed into a big net of light, and swept down. Bang! The entire mountain suddenly collapsed under the attack of this huge net. It seemed as if the sky had fallen down to the ground, and had shattered into small pieces within a split second. Subsequently, the rubble from the mountain was reduced to powder. Then, waves of strong astral winds set off and dispersed these dusts. Bang! A golden real elemental energy appeared from below and soared into the sky. A violent turbulence surged up and around. And a slim figure appeared along with it. He was dressed in blue clothes. His eyes looked profound, and his aura felt formidable. In fact, it seemed as if an ancient devil god had reincarnated. The golden divinities were boiling on Yi Zaiwen's entire body. An exceptional fighting intention was overflowing from his body. "Who are you?" Xing Feiyu's ice-cold eyes flickered indefinitely. He had roared these words out loudly. He had also felt that the energy of this man who stood before his eyes was boiling ferociously. Yi Shiwen grinned and replied, "Weren't you the one who was looking for me? Don't you wish to kill me? You are that so-called Dragon Master?" The second prince became bewildered when he looked into Yi Shiwen's eyes. He hadn't expected that the person they had been searching would appear in front of them in such a manner. Moreover, he was shocked to see that this man was much younger than he had expected. Martial arts experts could maintain their youthful appearance. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't a several hundred or 1,000 years old expert who had maintained his young appearance. Instead, he was very young. He looked 50 years old at most. How was it possible for such a young man to become a great master of alchemy? However, it must be true. Otherwise, Jiang Zhouqing would never have gone to meet him personally. Jiang Zhouqing had been practicing since several hundred years. Yet, even he couldn't surpass this dragon master. "You are a liar. Isn't that right? You are a liar because you claim that you are a great master of alchemy. You wanted to sneak into our Great Wei Empire, right? What's your objective?" The third prince exclaimed in anger when he saw Yi Zaiwen's real face for the first time. "Humph! Where do you come from? You have dared to infiltrate the forces of our meteor sect. You have bad intentions. Wait and watch how I crack down on you and find out about your secrets." Xing Feiyu sneered. His eyes didn't flicker anymore. His terrifying aura rushed out like an overwhelming vast ocean in order to suppress Yi Zaiwen's soul. "I didn't know where to look for you. However, I didn't know that you yourself would appear in front of me. The time spent on trying to find you here and there didn't go in vain after all." Xing Feiyu was at Sage Small Perfection Realm. He was leaps and bounds ahead of the Sage Peak Realm. Earlier, Yi Shiwen would have been no match for Xing Feiyu even if his fighting strength had been strong enough to rival that of the experts of the Sage Peak Realm. Not to mention that Xing Feiyu was considered a very tyrannical expert even in the Sage Small Perfection Realm. "It doesn't matter what your background is. You have dared to take advantage of me. You are courting death," Xing Feiyu shouted. His murderous aura surged up. He was a bit wary of Yi Shiwen at first. However, he didn't let that bother him for long. He belonged to a prestigious family, and he was a Heaven's Pride expert of his generation. Also, he had been unceasingly obtaining resources from the meteor sect. So, he wasn't worried about a random cultivator with no background even if the said expert also had good qualifications. The contest between a random cultivator with no background and an expert of a legitimate sect would be one-sided even if they were to be in the same realm. Their access to resources, spirit stones, divine tools, power techniques, and so on just weren't on same level. Xing Feiyu extended his big hand. Endless rays of light suddenly burst from it, and swept out towards Yi Shiwen to crush him. But Yi Shiwen wasn't going to be outdone. Golden divine beams had covered his entire body. In fact, it seemed as if Xing Feiyu was fighting against a golden statue. Bang! The fight had reached a superheated stage in no time. And both sides had started resorting to extreme methods. The entire space had shattered into pieces under their attacks. Their battle had reached to the sky. Those experts of the Great Wei Empire turned pale with fright. They were visibly surprised by Yi Zaiwen's strength. All of them were familiar with Xing Feiyu's strength. He had merely been practicing for 300 years, but he had already entered the Sage Small Perfection realm. He was a Heaven's Pride expert of his generation. And there was almost no doubt that he would advance to Great Sage Realm in the future. He possessed incredible strength. That leader beast of Sage Small Perfection Realm had also been slaughtered by him a moment ago. So, they had seen the extent of Xing Feiyu's strength. The ape leader was also in Sage Small Perfection realm. Still, there had been a difference of cloud and mud between their strengths. Xing Feiyu's strength was so tyrannical that it was difficult to find a match for him among his peers. Perhaps, only those top Heaven's Pride experts could overshadow him. They had thought that Yi Shiwen would only have the strength of the Sage Peak realm at most. However, it didn't seem like he was in a disadvantageous position while fighting with Xing Feiyu. And this had left them in extreme shock. I didn't expect you to have some means of your own. However, that's also useless. After all, what are you in comparison to our meteor sect? Xing Feiyu hadn't obtained the upper hand over Yi Shiwen yet. And this had surprised him. He would have understood if Yi Shiwen had been in the Sage Small Perfection realm. However, he didn't seem to be. In fact, he appeared to be in the intermediate stage of Sage realm. But Yi Shiwen had still managed to match him until now. And this had surpassed Xing Feiyu's imagination by far. Yi Shiwen slightly raised the corner of his mouth. His fighting strength had made a huge progress after he had made the breakthrough into the intermediate stage of Sage realm. He couldn't have dealt with Xing Feiyu so easily if he had still been in the initial stage of Sage realm. In fact, he would have been in a very difficult situation. He would have had to retreat instead. After all, his realm differed by a lot from that of Xing Feiyu's. Xing Feiyu had started operating the green rainbow meteor cultivation method inside his body. This was a very tyrannical power technique of the meteor sect. This technique had emerged out of the meteor sect's name. A starry white light was emanating from his entire body. He was attacking with his entire strength, and wasn't holding back. They'll send you on your way to hell! Xing Feiyu flashed an evil grin. He brandished his palm. This was the meteor sect's technique, Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm. Only a few people in the meteor sect knew this palm technique. In fact, most of the core disciples hadn't even gotten the opportunity to learn this technique. However, Xing Feiyu had gotten this opportunity because he was a core disciple and a Heaven's Pride expert. This was enough to determine how praiseworthy this palm technique was. That palm slapped through the clouds that hung from the sky, and broke down the entire blue dome of heaven. The killing intention was clearly overflowing to the heavens. However, he was surprised to see Yi Shiwen smiling in the face of this attack. Yi Shiwen suddenly raised the corner of his mouth, and brandished his palm. However, it wasn't the fire clouds falling sky hand this time. Rather, it was the Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm. Moreover, Yi Zaiwen's hands had somehow displayed it in its truest form. It wasn't entirely in its purest form, so to say. However, it looked more tyrannical than the attack that had been launched by Xing Feiyu. This was because of the star power in Yi Zaiwen's body. Bang! The two big hands suddenly collided in the sky. Countless shadows of those two palms filled the entire sky. And it seemed as if these palm shadows were ripping the vast sky apart. The world shook and collapsed under their attacks. The murderous energy flew from the sky and surged all over. The scene appeared similar to the Judgment Day. It seemed as if cold water had been poured onto those princes and other people of the Great Wei Empire. Chills ran down their spines. They looked insignificant in front of this level of fighting power. They could only acquire the position of the Emperor of Great Wei Empire. However, they were undoubtedly insignificant in front of these genuine young elites. Only a colossal force like the meteor sect could have nurtured such young elites. Indeed, there were other people that had such exceptional innate talent. However, other people used to get a pitiful amount of resources when compared to the disciples of these big sections. A good amount of resources was the so-called basic requirement for effective cultivation. In fact, it was considered a joke if someone wanted to make the breakthroughs without having the unceasing support of these resources. How is it possible? A look of fright flashed on Xing Feiyu's face. He wasn't shocked because Yi Shiwen was able to contend against him. Instead, it was because Yi Shiwen had used the Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm technique. After all, this was the meteor sect's secret technique. Are you also a disciple of the meteor sect? It's impossible. Could Yi Shiwen also be a disciple of the meteor sect? He had never seen Yi Shiwen. But then again, the meteor sect had several million disciples. How could he recognize all of them? However, another thought crossed his mind. It would have been normal if he hadn't heard about an ordinary person. But Yi Shiwen wasn't ordinary. He had a very high cultivation level at a very young age. So, how come he had never heard of him? He didn't believe that Yi Shiwen could be a hidden cultivator or whatnot. A chicken is a chicken, and a phoenix is a phoenix. A chicken can't be compared with a phoenix even if a phoenix has met with a misfortune. Only the cultivation of a person is the factor that can decide whether they are a chicken or a phoenix. A phoenix will always be a phoenix. A phoenix will stand out even if they have sunk into a group of chickens. Their shine won't get concealed. Could he be some elder's foreign disciple? This wasn't impossible. After all, the meteor sect had so many elders, and many of them were eccentric. They would teach top-secret techniques to outsiders because they considered it to be their predestined affinity. The so-called immortal fate is beyond everything. And Yi Shiwen's Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm technique also seemed somewhat unfamiliar. Therefore, this ought to be the case. Of course, Xing Feiyue would never get to know the real reason why Yi Shiwen's Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm technique looked strange. It wasn't because he hadn't learned it properly. And it wasn't because he had misinterpreted some vital concept while learning it from a copy of a secret martial arts book that was left behind by some master. Instead, it was because Yi Shiwen had used the Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm technique for the first time in his life. He had certainly used the mysterious space in that split second to deduce the mysteries of the Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm technique. However, it would obviously look a bit strange since he had used it for the first time. So, this out of his hands. Meteor sect? I am not! Yi Shiwen grinned. His snow-white teeth somewhat horrified the people. It's over! Yi Shiwen spoke up. The killing intention flashed in his eyes. Yi Shiwen had never shown any leniency in killing his enemies. A tooth for a tooth, and an eye for an eye was his motto. If someone wanted to fight with him, he would certainly do that. And if someone wanted to kill him, he would certainly kill that person. It was that simple. The news of this mustn't spread outside. It would cause a huge uproar, whether it was about the involvement of Great Wei Empire or about the corpse of the Star Colossus. The Great Wei Empire wasn't a very big empire for the Meteor Sect. However, this matter concerned Meteor Sect. And they wouldn't allow other people to interfere. In fact, they would become extremely enraged if they found out about the things that were going on here. And he reckoned that he would be chased by a group of great sage experts if the news of the corpse of the Star Colossus got out. Yi Shiwen knew that he must not leave any clue. To be continued. Chapter 522. This was a very realistic problem. The so-called killing people and preventing them from divulging a secret was so. Yi Shiwen would certainly die if they didn't die. He might escape if one great sage expert were to chase him. However, what about a group of great sage experts? How would he escape then? Also, these people wanted to kill him as well. Therefore, letting them live could prove to be even more troublesome for him. Yi Shiwen deliberated for a while. He then decided to put away the Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm. He had obtained this palm technique from the blood-red-clothed young master. However, he had never used it. In fact, he hadn't even practiced it. Right now, he wanted to annihilate these people in the shortest span of time. Otherwise, some formidable ancient demon beasts might arrive here. And that would be too bad. One mustn't forget that each of these beasts possessed extraordinary spiritual intelligence. This spiritual intelligence wasn't inferior to the intelligence of an ordinary human. Moreover, many of them had been alive since thousands of years, and were simply old foxes. So, why wouldn't they have any interest in the treasures that were present here? Yi Shiwen attacked without any hesitation after he thought of this. His entire body transformed into a universe. This was a universe that had existed since eternity, a universe that was spread everywhere in eternal universe. The so-called eternal universe was the collection of space and time. and only God could control space and time. Yi Zaiwen's universe was continuously growing. In fact, there would come a day when he would have so much power that he would be able to control the entirety of time and space. And nobody would be able to do him any harm when that would happen. He hadn't become that terrifying at present. However, faint signs of it were present. His universe would transform into a realm one day. However, this was a matter for the future. Yi Zaiwen's fist suddenly pressed down like a huge star. It carried terrifying momentum. In fact, it seemed like a boundless galaxy as it swept down on Xing Feiyue to crush him. Yi Shiwen had attacked with all of his strength. This was the first time that he had attacked with his entire strength ever since he had made the breakthrough into the intermediate stage of Sage Realm. So, this attack was entirely different from the ones that he had performed when he was in the initial stage of Sage Realm. After all, he had made a substantial progress. Yi Zaiwen's ferocious aura arrived over Xing Feiyue's head, and overwhelmed him completely. It looked incredible. Xing Feiyue had started his journey many years ago. And he had become a famous Heaven's Pride expert in a very short span of time after he had entered the meteor sect. However, the meteor world and the true martial world were different. The true martial world had changed into a place where independent warlords used to compete for the power that had been vacated with the decline of the true martial university. However, the meteor sect was still in its flourishing period. The meteor sect alone was the largest force. Therefore, there weren't many competitions taking place in the meteor sect. The Heaven's Pride experts were particularly considered to be isolated. And they weren't allowed to compete with each other, at least not until they had reached the Sage Realm. Therefore, Xing Feiyue had never fought with the Heaven's Pride experts of his generation. Let alone with a person like Yi Shiwen who had taken the lives of many Heaven's Pride experts. He may have been engaged in the occasional fights, but he had never been beaten down before. Moreover, Yi Shiwen was much younger than him. Yi Shiwen used his entire strength, and didn't hold back one bit. The Big Bang Stardust Fist rushed through several hundred miles. It smashed the void into pieces wherever it went, and the chaos was unleashed from the other side. Then, this startling attack suddenly materialized in front of Xing Feiyue. Bang! Xing Feiyue's Thousand Stars Tyrant palm got crushed in an instant. The starlight that had spread across the entire sky also vanished. Instead, Yi Zaiwen's fist exploded like the Big Bang. Crack, crack! The horrifying sound of breaking of bones could be heard. Xing Feiyue's hands had gotten crushed. After that, his body entered the spatial fault. The space broke down, and he sank into it. His entire body had been drenched in blood. He was in a tragic state. The scene looked too horrible. Senior brother Xing has sustained injuries? Those people of the imperial clan of the Great Wei State were left dumbstruck as they saw this scene. Xing Feiyue was a godlike figure to them. However, he had been seriously injured by this dragon master. He was considered among the top-notch Heaven's Pride experts of the meteor sect. However, he was left powerless and unable to fight back. It seemed as if they had been brought back to their senses by the sound of a loud and ear-piercing thunderclap. However, the power of Yi Zaiwen's fist didn't decrease. It swept down and struck Xing Feiyue's main body. His bones began to issue gurgle sound under the ferocious pressure. And blood gushed out from his entire body. Xing Feiyue was struggling with all his strength. His body had begun to transform into flames under the starlight. He looked like a burning fireball, like a star that had illuminated the eternal universe. These burning flames began to burn Yi Zaiwen's fist. This produced a noise. It wasn't clear how hot those flames were. However, they looked exceptionally ferocious. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. You think this will work? An ordinary person would have gotten burnt to death by these terrifying flames. This was also one of the hidden cards of Xing Feiyue's. However, Yi Shiwen had practiced the tyrant body technique till the 7th layer. In fact, he could even contend against a sage tool with his bare hands. So, one could imagine how ferocious his body had become. Therefore, it was impossible for him to be defeated by such a counterattack. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's fist had transformed into a huge star, and it refused to bow under the impact of this counterattack. Instead, his fist pounded even more quickly. Those princes and other experts felt as if two stars had suddenly collided in a boundless universe. The world had collapsed, and everyone had been left to tremble with fear. Ah! Xing Feiyue screamed. He appeared to be in an exceptionally dire situation. Yi Zaiwen's ferocious fist had already crushed his entire body. His flesh had also begun to tear apart, and his thick bones had become exposed. His blood had started to splash out as well. It was evident that he had sustained very serious injuries. He realized that he had messed with the wrong person. "I won't go down!" Xing Feiyue roared, and his voice stirred the horizon. However, Yi Shiwen didn't show any mercy as his mountain-like fist slammed down on Xing Feiyue. Rumble! Xing Feiyue's bones got shattered, and more of his blood splashed out. It looked terrible. His internal organs had been destroyed, and his soul was also annihilated. Yi Shiwen searched for Xing Feiyue's storage ring. Xing Feiyue was extremely rich when compared to a troubled person like Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen alternated between being rich and poor. He swept in his divine sense, and found an abundance of wealth inside Xing Feiyue's stock. The amount of primary spirit dawn was alone more than 30 million. And the total wealth surpassed 100 million after the value of the various other treasures were added to it. It could be said that Xing Feiyue had been far wealthier than ordinary sage experts. Of course, even this wealth of 100 million might not be enough for a spendthrift like Yi Shiwen. You dared to kill him! The third prince was shocked. His heart sank as he realized that Xing Feiyue had been killed. It seems like I did, Yi Shiwen replied in a carefree manner. He was standing in the sky, and he was looking down at everyone like they were already dead. That's right. He was looking at a group of dead people. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen was looking into their eyes. A chill ran down the second prince's spine. He had suddenly realized that Yi Shiwen could kill all of them. You want to kill us? The second prince spoke up. His complexion had changed very significantly since he couldn't stop himself from getting scared this time. He knew that Yi Shiwen would kill all of them in order to preserve the secret of this place. Otherwise, the secret of this place would certainly leak out. Run! Quickly! The third prince shouted. He transformed into a streamer of light and promptly flew in one direction. Everyone else also flew away in different directions in quick succession. He believed that Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to kill all of them if they escaped in different directions. And he was obviously hoping that he would be able to escape while Yi Shiwen was killing the other people. Humph! Yi Shiwen snorted. The spirit energies began to condense frantically in the air. Then, a superhuge wave condensed and swept out. It then condensed into a great seal that filled the sky. And the inverting ocean seal suddenly swept down. Bang! A huge explosion occurred. A vast space got smashed to pieces. The chaos leaked out from the cracks in the space, and overflowed the entire sky. Bang! Those people wanted to escape. However, it was impossible for them to match Yi Zaiwen's speed. Yi Shiwen had destroyed them in a split second. Overturning the heaven's seal was a wonderful ancient technique. One could even overturn the blue dome of heaven if one practiced this technique to the peak. Yi Shiwen practiced this technique all the time. However, he had grasped it only recently. In fact, he hadn't even practiced the inverting ocean seal to the peak. So, it wasn't clear when he would grasp the overturning the heaven seal. Let alone, practice it to the pinnacle. Yi Shiwen wiped clean the traces after he had annihilated these people. He then conveniently collected the dead body of the massive star colossus. This star colossus was enormous. So, it was very difficult for Yi Shiwen to collect it and put it inside, even though it was dead. Fortunately, he had the heavenly source mirror. So, he placed the star colossus inside the heavenly source mirror. An ordinary spatial ring or some other space-type divine tool would have broken down if it had been used in place of the heavenly source mirror. Yi Shiwen had only consumed a little bit of this Star Colossus star core in order to make the breakthrough to the intermediate stage of Sage Realm. After that, Yi Shiwen started to play with Xing Feiyu's Divine Tool Palace. He could only sigh at this huge world since it was full of extraordinary wonders. Someone had actually made a sage tool out of a palace. Moreover, it could attack as well as defend. Such a divine tool was extremely rare. In fact, it was rarer than those inner divine armors and those other defensive divine tools. However, this wasn't enough to tempt Yi Shiwen. After all, Yemo was undoubtedly more important to him than these rare divine tools. Yi Shiwen would gamble everything if it meant waking up Yemo from his slumber. Not to mention that Yemo had become like this for his sake. In fact, Yi Shiwen would have long become a cold corpse if Yemo hadn't saved him. Yi Shiwen had realized that this Star Colossus was a treasure house of herbs. Its corpse was like an incomparably huge stockpile of resources. He had only absorbed a little bit of the star core, and even that had been enough for him to make the breakthrough into the intermediate stage of Sage Realm. Therefore, Yemo would surely get well soon if he swallowed this entire colossus. Yi Shiwen cast a spell to wake up Yemo when this thought crossed his mind. Yi Shiwen could take the initiative to wake up Yemo, thanks to the growing number of sage tools which Yemo had swallowed. Yi Shiwen no longer needed to wait for him to wake up on his own. However, Yi Shiwen wouldn't have wanted to wake him up as soon as possible if it wasn't important. To be continued. Chapter 523. A cold wind was whistling. It had transformed into a freezing astral wind at higher altitudes. The sound of fluttering of clothes echoed in the vicinity. However, Yi Shiwen didn't seem to care as that cold wind blew against his face. In fact, he didn't even use his real elemental energy to block the wind. "You are fortunate that you found a dead star colossus," Yi Mo's voice echoed inside Yi Ziwen's mind. His voice was still weak. However, his condition had improved a lot after he had swallowed that palace sage tool. Yi Shiwen nodded. He agreed with Yi Mo's point of view. After all, the true Martial University's decline was enough to guess the tyranny of an adult star colossus. Such a star colossus might not appear for 10,000 years. However, it would cause an enormous calamity once it had appeared. Therefore, this was an enormous opportunity for him, even though he had only obtained the dead body of a star colossus. Even the great Sage Realm experts would go crazy over it. "You should be able to recover after you've swallowed the dead body of this star colossus," Yi Shiwen replied. He believed that Yemo would rejuvenate by using the exuberant vitality of this star colossus. "Indeed, but," Yemo shook his head and said, "this is an enormous opportunity for you. And it could give you a huge boost. So, it would be extremely unfortunate if I swallowed it." "What are you saying?" Yi Shiwen asked. "This star colossus belongs to the same race as the one that is sealed in the true martial world. But this one is merely an infant." Yi Mo's words left Yi Shiwen speechless. This star colossus had been so dreadful at infancy. So, one couldn't even imagine how dreadful an adult star colossus might be. However, it needed to be mentioned that an adult star colossus appeared as big as a star, and used to feed on planets. However, even this one's strength clearly surpasses the great Sage Realm. Moreover, the blood slave that you control can be used for controlling this star colossus. This star colossus is dead. However, only its soul has been destroyed. Its body is still the same as it was when it was alive. Moreover, I am afraid that its corpse will eventually give birth to a resentful soul if things go on like this. And that would bring an enormous disaster," Yemo explained. "Your blood slave has also been condensed from the soul of a star colossus. It displays only a small might at present. However, it could contend against the experts of half-step Great Sage Realm if you integrate it with this star colossus' formidable body. Moreover, your blood slave will eventually enter the half-step Great Sage Realm once it has absorbed the entire soul of the star colossus that is inside the blood pond. And it will be able to contend against the Great Sage experts when that happens." It will provide you with an enormous amount of protection as a result. In fact, even that Mu Xingjie can't harm you if you have the protection of Great Sage level. Plus, I don't need it urgently. Moreover, I will recover quickly once you have the strength of Great Sage realm. After all, the level of strength decides whether a matter is difficult or not. A lot of problems can be solved very easily if you have enough strength. Yi Shiwen nodded. He didn't hesitate after he had heard Yi Mo's words. He first made the blood slave try and control the dead body of that star colossus. It could be said that the blood slave was doing the job here. However, Yi Zaiwen's soul was connected to the blood slave. Therefore, it was no different than him doing the job. After this, a pair of huge wings appeared on his back. His wings suddenly fluttered. He transformed into a streamer and disappeared into the horizon. A Heaven's Pride expert of the meteor sect had died in the heavenly pit. This news should have caused a huge sensation. However, this news had been drowned by the other news that had proliferated from the heavenly pit. The secrets inside the heavenly pit had gradually been dug out along with the arrival of a great number of experts. Even the information about the bereaved had been excavated with the passage of time. It turned out that these ruins belonged to the bereaved Third Eye race. It was reported that the members of the Third Eye race had a third eye on their foreheads. However, the rest of their body was similar to that of humans. One such race had been present among the races which were purged by the meteor sect in the past. Therefore, this news had proliferated even more quickly. It was reported that this was the ancestral land of the Third Eye race. So, this was their foundation place. It had certainly declined. However, there should be many incredible treasures present inside. 3 years' time had passed in a flash. The bereaved were no longer part of rumors alone. Rather, there was conclusive evidence now. In fact, someone had even seen the bereaved people. And it was reported that the high-level experts of the entire meteor sect were extremely concerned because of the appearance of the bereaved. Thus, they had sent a large number of experts here. There was a city outside the heavenly pit. This city had become popular because of the heavenly pit. Hundreds of thousands of people had gathered in this city in a short time. And the majority of them were cultivators. A scholar-looking man was sitting upright on the main seat inside a lively restaurant. Many travel-worn experts had surrounded him. He faintly opened his mouth and said, "You newcomers think that you will find some treasures inside this heavenly pit. However, I will suggest you that it would be better to not provoke some people. The small Jupiter of the meteor sect is an example of such a person. His strength has already entered the half-step Great Sage realm. It is difficult to find a match for him in the younger generation. In fact, nobody can outmatch him, apart from those old Great Sage experts. However, almost all the Great Sage experts in this meteor world belong to the meteor sect. After all, this is their territory. 1 or 2 Great Sage experts may occasionally arrive from outside, however, they don't dare to mess with him either. This is the reason why he has suddenly risen to fame. Of course, how can we dare to provoke the experts of the meteor sect? The small Jupiter had earned his fame long ago. It is said that he will soon enter the Great Sage realm. How can we provoke someone like him? Yeah. It's best that we don't mess with those people of the meteor sect. Many random cultivators with no background spoke up one after another. Offending the true martial university in the true martial world might not be a big matter. However, offending the meteor sect in the meteor world was akin to courting death. Isn't there any other ferocious expert apart from him? Someone curiously asked. They had arrived here very recently. So, they wanted to know about the situation here. 3 years had passed. However, those who wanted to fish up some gold, or who wanted some treasures, were still arriving unceasingly. Many people had died inside, and their bodies had been ravaged by the ancient demon beasts. However, there were many who had obtained a lot of benefits in the pit, and had soared to the sky after that. Therefore, this place's allure had attracted many people, and they had been arriving here unceasingly. This was probably an example of the saying seeking riches and honor amidst danger. There's another calamity star apart from the meteor sex small Jupiter. Nobody knows his name. He usually dresses in green clothes, and carries an 8 or 9 years old girl along with him. Everyone calls him the green-clothed traveler. He had become famous after a fight 2 years ago. He had once managed to escape from a great sage expert. And an expert of half-step great sage realm has also died by his hands. He is incomparably dreadful. These two are the most terrifying experts. But there's no need to worry as long as you don't run into them. Of course, you can only blame your fate if you unluckily come across the attack of a great sage expert. That scholar laughed mischievously and said. Everyone nodded. This was true, great sage realm experts weren't the real danger here. They were certainly very powerful. However, they wouldn't move into action without any reason. After all, those old and sly foxes wouldn't move into action unless they had obtained some concrete information. Therefore, sage experts were the main powerhouses that were active inside the heavenly pit. And these two individuals were the most frightening among them. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of footsteps came from downstairs. It was gentle and in rhythm. A green shadow appeared in front of everyone along with the sound of footsteps. They were surprised to see a handsome young man dressed up in green. He didn't look very outstanding from appearance. However, he seemed aloof. There was a little girl by his side. She was dressed up in a sky-blue long skirt. Her skirt also had silver embroidery on it. Her face looked delicate and pretty. Her complexion looked a bit red. Her eyebrows were slanted, and her mouth was small. A timid expression was hung on her face. She looked approximated 8 or 9 years old. Her long and silver hair was rolled up into 2 knots on the top of her head. 2 silver bangs were softly hanging down over her eyes. They were dangling in a rhythmic fashion. Silver hair. Everyone noticed that this young girl had silver hair. After all, this made her look very peculiar. However, they then noticed that the young man with her was dressed in green clothes. And they immediately remembered the green-clothed traveler that scholar had told them about. Isn't that? Dresses in green clothes, and carries a young girl along. Even that scholar had held his breath when he had seen them arrive. He had recognized who this person was. It couldn't be anyone else. After all, only that green-clothed traveler could dare to dress up like that. It wasn't that nobody had tried to impersonate him. However, he had quickly found out about those who had done so. And then, he had killed them. In fact, he had killed around a dozen impostors in a short span of time. Thus, nobody had dared to impersonate the green-clothed traveler after that. That little girl obviously became a bit timid when she saw so many people around. So, she grabbed that green-clothed traveler's big hand. However, the green-clothed traveler merely looked at the little girl with a faint smile on his face. Then, he took her to a table. Everyone held their breaths as they saw these 2 young individuals, one big and one small. They didn't dare to say anything. Yi Shiwen wasn't too surprised when he noticed that everyone had held their breaths. He merely picked up Xiaoya and made her sit on a chair. The little girl sat there in a cute manner. But she didn't say anything. Yi Shiwen ordered some dishes. The trace of a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth under the mask. He had spent these 3 years fighting. More and more people had continued to arrive since an increasing number of things had been discovered inside the heavenly pit. Moreover, it seemed that the craze for this place wouldn't quieten down in the several decades to come, or even the several hundred years after. This 3 years' time had a very big effect on him. His slightly unstable realm had consolidated, and had become stable. He had also made narrow escapes many times. However, the first one had been the direst of them all. This was when the meteor sect had investigated about Xing Feiyu's death. And Yi Shiwen had attracted the meteor sect's rage because of that. Consequently, they had sent a great sage expert to kill him. He was eventually forced to merge the blood slave with that star colossus. And its fighting strength had increased very drastically as a result. This is why he was able to escape from that great sage expert. That fight had resulted in a bloodbath. Yi Shiwen had escaped after sustaining serious injuries. Moreover, a senior half-step great sage expert of the meteor sect had perished in an instance that had taken place later. He even clashed with the small Jupiter one time. And it had indeed been very terrible. However, it was time to leave. Too many changes had occurred in the last 3 years' time. For example, the Great Wei Empire had already elected a new emperor. To be continued. Chapter 524. The second prince, third prince, fourth prince, and the seventh prince had died at Yi Ziwen's hands. And the big prince had been suppressed as well. Therefore, only the 23rd prince had remained amongst the favorites. So, he had eventually obtained the title of the emperor. And people's expectations had again fallen into his hands. He had ascended the throne 2 years ago. However, not everyone was convinced with his credentials. So, the Wood Dragon had to come out of the heavenly pit in order to help him in stabilizing his regime. However, Yi Shiwen had decided to wander inside the heavenly pit. In fact, that great sage expert of the Northern Dipper had also searched about for the treasures for several months. However, he hadn't found anything worthwhile here. Therefore, he had left much sooner. Many other great sage experts had also left in a similar fashion. They had certainly found many exotic treasures. But these treasures weren't very useful for them. Otherwise, Yi Shiwen and that small Jupiter wouldn't have been considered as the most ferocious people around. This little girl's name was Xiaoya. Yi Shiwen had met her when she was being chased by some ancient demon beasts. He had rescued her in a very convenient fashion. He had then asked her about how she had gotten there. But she didn't know anything about herself. In fact, it seemed as if her memory had been sealed by someone. She only remembered her name, Xiaoya. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had no choice but to take her along. Fortunately, Xiaoya was exceptionally cute. She never quarreled, and never made any noise. In other words, she was far well behaved than that wolf cub. Therefore, he had happily kept her by his side. His cultivation had strengthened enormously in these 3 years. His cultivation of intermediate stage of Sage Realm had consolidated by now. So, he could make the breakthrough into the late stage of the Sage Realm at will. It could be estimated that he would be able to contend against the experts of the Sage Great Perfection Realm without the support of the Star Colossus once he had made the breakthrough. Yi Shiwen had disguised himself, and he had even used the restraining breath technique to transform the Star Colossus into a human form. However, too many flaws had remained despite his best efforts. Consequently, he would still be exposed to danger if he were to come across a top expert. It was very important for him to be strong enough to deal with these external forces. He didn't get much time to think since the food arrived soon after. He obviously didn't need to eat. However, Xiaoya did. So, he only observed Xiaoya's gentle and refined movements as she ate. Her small mouth would swallow the food very slowly. However, she was eating at a very quick speed for someone her age. Yi Shiwen was watching someone eating so gently yet with such ferocity for the first time. Xiaoya had soon consumed everything that had been set on the table. She then turned her small face towards Yi Shiwen. She seemingly felt a bit embarrassed. And Yi Shiwen was also left to wonder. How could her small belly pack so much? Yi Shiwen didn't stay once Xiaoya had finished eating. He picked up Xiaoya, transformed into a streamer, and disappeared into the city. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief after both individuals had departed. After all, Yi Ziwen's deterrent force had affected them very significantly under the shade of the enlightening mind ancient tree. Moreover, they had been discussing about him when he had arrived. Subsequently, they were afraid that he would kill them if he were in a bad mood. The people of the Meteor sect had also received this news. So, they arrived here not long after Yi Shiwen had left. However, they were unaware that Yi Shiwen had already flown off into the space. "Where are we going?" Xiaoya looked at him, and asked in her soft voice. Xiaoya was standing beside Yi Shiwen above the escaping light high up in the sky. The loud astral winds in the upper atmosphere had nearly overshadowed her voice. However, Yishiwen had still heard it since the astral wind couldn't affect his hearing. "We're going home." Yishiwen gently smiled and replied. He had been wandering for several years now. So, he wanted to return. However, he didn't wish to use the Northern Dipper's transmission portals to return. Instead, he wanted to return on his own. He would have to fight Chao Yu in another 10 years. Chao Yu had entered the Sage Great Perfection realm a few years ago. So, it wasn't clear to what extent he would have grown after 10 years. Yishiwen was no match for him as per his current cultivation. Moreover, the Star Colossus couldn't help him in this case. In fact, he couldn't even reveal it since it would be too bad for him if the high-level experts found out about it. Moreover, this was his trump card. So, he would take it out only if he was in a life-or-death situation. He could only strive to promote himself to the peak of Sage Realm in these 10 years. Only then could he contend against Chao Yu. Not much time was left. Home. This word was very strange for Xiaoya. She didn't remember anything when Yishiwen had met her. She didn't even know how she had arrived inside the heavenly pit. The first thing she remembered was that she was trying to hide from those ancient demon beasts that were chasing her. Yes. Yishiwen nodded. He had already made a plan. He would make Xiaoya enter the true martial university after their return because he had found out that she possessed dreadful talent. He had met her 1 year ago. And he had taught her the bright jade cultivation technique 6 months ago. This was the technique that he had used for laying his foundation in the past. Who could have imagined that she would make the breakthrough into the Xiantian realm in just 6 months? It had nearly depressed Yishiwen to death. He had gone through so many trials in order to make that breakthrough. He alone knew how many dangerous expeditions he had gone on. However, Xiaoya hadn't needed to do anything. She had automatically made the breakthrough into the Xiantian realm. In fact, Yishiwen hadn't even given her any medicinal pills for support. He hadn't given her a medicinal pill because she wasn't like him. He could digest those pills with the help of his mysterious space. Those pills could neither have any bizarre effect on him, nor could they shake his foundation. However, the fact that it had worked on him didn't mean that it would work on others as well. So, he wanted to make her practice for a few years so that he could observe her and polish her foundation. Who could have imagined that she would improve at such a lightning speed? She had entered the Xiantian realm in just 6 months. Such talent was enough to blow him away. In fact, she was talented enough to shatter the pride of those Heaven's Pride experts. Thus, he had sprouted the plan to make Xiaoya enter the true martial university after his return. However, he wouldn't let her join the Hidden Star Peak. Instead, he'd have her enlist in some other heritage. After all, the Hidden Star Peak was in an extremely miserable condition. In fact, the entire heritage was in ruins. It could be said that they would have kept on trying to mend a complete version of the Hidden Star scripture generation after generation if Yishiwen hadn't mended it for them. It wasn't the time for the university to recruit the disciples. That only happened once in 100 years. However, it wasn't a difficult thing for him to make a person enter the true martial university. This was due to his status of a core disciple as well as a Heaven's Pride expert. In fact, it would be a piece of cake for him. Moreover, people would always welcome such a genius with open arms. It had been a grand occasion for Yishiwen when he was in Yiyuan school and the true martial university had opened its gates to recruit new disciples. After all, it was a once-in-a-century event. Therefore, he had put his entire effort to get recruited. However, putting someone through the admission process was nothing more than a slight show of strength and status for the current Yishiwen. His status and strength had changed. So had his vision. Ants on the ground can never see the eagles hovering in the sky. "Let's go!" Yishiwen stated in a loud voice. Then, he suddenly accelerated the speed of his flying light. He tore his way through the vast sky, and flew out of the meteor world's atmosphere. What the hell is this place? Yishiwen was in the void. He was standing above a desolate planet. There was nothing in sight. The starry space was spread as far as he could see. He had arrived in this section of space after flying for 3 months since he had left the meteor world. However, he had been wandering here for 1 month now, and he still couldn't get out of this starry space. Hallucinatory star field! Yishuan checked in his star atlas and exclaimed. He had gotten hold of the Northern Dipper's top secret star atlas. The star atlas stated that this star region was known as the hallucinatory star field because it was very difficult to travel through this section of the space. The space was overlapping, and there were many natural transmission portals lying around. Therefore, one might end up passing through one of these natural transmission portals if one weren't careful. Consequently, one would be sent back to the beginning of the region. This place wasn't as dangerous as some other parts of the space. However, many people had gotten trapped here, and had eventually died. Yishuan shouldn't have needed these many days to cross this place since he had Sage Realm cultivation. Moreover, he also had deployed his demon wings. However, he had still been wandering in this region for 1 month now. Xiaoya was cutely standing beside him. She didn't say anything. She merely raised her small face and looked at Yishuan. She seldom spoke. In fact, she wouldn't have uttered a single word in this 1 month if Yishuan hadn't asked her to. Let's go and have a look. Yishuan had detected some fluctuations. They had seemingly resulted from a fight that was happening far away. The fluctuations were very fine since they had transmitted from far away. However, he had still detected them. And he had become excited because the people who were fighting could turn out to be some acquaintances. And they could possibly guide him out of this place if that were the case. Yishuan had only flown forward for a moment when he saw that dozens of people were closely sticking together inside a boundless star field. And they were surrounded by several hundred star beasts. Damn it! How have we landed into a group of star beasts? It's not like our clan has arrived at this hallucinatory star field for the first time. In fact, we already knew that these star beasts inhabit this region. So, how could we land into their group by mistake? The people of Li clan must have been responsible for this. An expert who appeared to be in his 30s bitterly spoke up as he brandished a blade towards those star beasts. His cultivation had already entered the initial stage of the Sage Realm. His blade carried extraordinary might. However, these star beasts were even more ferocious. In fact, more than 1/3 of them were at the Sage Realm. Therefore, he had slowly been forced to retreat even though he was strong. Concentrate on them, and don't complain. What's the use of saying these things at this time? First we need to get out of here. Only then can we settle the debt with those bastards. A middle-aged man spoke up at this time. He stood beside that seemingly 30-year-old expert. Yishuan was surprised to see his robust tall figure. He was waving his spear as if it were a dragon. Those star beasts screamed and transformed into blood fog wherever that spear went. His cultivation made it seem as if he had entered Sage Small Perfection realm long ago. So, a single blow from his spear was enough to kill one of those star beasts of initial stage of Sage Realm. Moreover, it could conveniently kill a large number of those semi-sage level star beasts as well. This battle had transformed into a bloodbath. Both sides had suffered a disastrous number of casualties. Therefore, the star beasts that had surrounded them suddenly withdrew. They no longer encircled them. Those experts relaxed to some extent after those star beasts had retreated. They promptly sat down cross-legged in the space, and began to meditate in order to restore the energy inside their bodies. The richer ones among them used medicinal pills to restore their energy. Medicinal pills were precious. However, it was more important to preserve life at such a dangerous place. Who is there? That spear-wielding middle-aged man shouted at this time. His knife-like sharp vision swept inside the void. Don't worry. We mean no harm. 2 figures slowly appeared in the space. To be continued. Chapter 525. Don't worry. We mean no harm. 2 figures slowly appeared in the space. A tall figure dressed up in green appeared in front of everyone. There was another short figure with him. This silhouette wore blue clothes. Everyone let out a sigh of relief when they noticed that this man's cultivation was only at the intermediate stage of the sage realm. So, they didn't need to worry even if this man harbored malice. After all, what could an insignificant expert of the intermediate stage of the sage realm do? A dozen or so individuals in this group were at the intermediate stage of the sage realm. Some of them were also at the late stage of the sage realm. Moreover, some were even at the peak stage of the sage realm. That middle-aged man was at the sage small complete realm. In fact, an expert of the intermediate stage of the sage realm posed no threat to him even though he had sustained serious injuries. "Who are you?" the middle-aged man asked. He felt somewhat alienated from these two individuals. However, he wasn't very vigilant. What could an insignificant expert of the intermediate stage of the sage realm do? He could suppress him with the flick of his hand. "We are travelers. My younger sister and I have accidentally arrived in the hallucinatory star field. Now we can't find a way out of this place. We don't know if we can get out of here on our own. Can you take us along with you so that we can leave this place? It will be a big favor on us." Yishuan cupped his hands in gratitude and said, "Taking you along with us isn't an issue. However, you've also seen that we've perhaps been trapped by someone. We're already in the borderline zone of the hallucinatory star field. However, we may come across an unavoidable deadly fight at any time. And it won't be good if you were to come to harm because of us. So, you must give it a proper thought first." The middle-aged man smiled and explained the situation in a straightforward manner. "Villa Lord! Villa Lord, you mustn't do this! Villa Lord, you mustn't do this! God knows if the Li clan may have sent these people. We may possibly get exposed if we take them along with us. And we may have to face an endless number of star beasts if that's the case. Consequently, it would become very difficult for us to find the green-scaled fruit for sister-in-law." The man who had used the blade promptly stepped forward and spoke up. The voice of the middle-aged man hadn't even faded when many of the other experts started attempting to dissuade him in quick succession. It was evident that they were extremely careful. They were afraid that Yishuan could be an enemy spy or whatnot. "I have already made up my mind," the middle-aged man firmly said. "We have already lost many young brothers in our quest for the green-scaled fruit. How can I, Yen Hong-yi, lose any more of our young brothers because of my family's affair? Villa Lord, we are doing this willingly." Even the brothers who have died would have no complaints. Sister-in-law treats us so well. She doesn't look down on us because of our lowly background. We shall not give up, no matter what. That blade wielder firmly replied. "Shut up. Do you wish to lose all of our brothers here?" Yen Hong-yi, the middle-aged man, chided him. "I've decided to plunder the great building. I've also heard that someone had once found the green-scaled fruit inside the great building. It's still much better than trying to find a needle in a haystack inside this hallucinatory star field." Yishuan started to admire Yen Hong-yi as he heard his words. He had seen so many cold-blooded leaders who had never hesitated in putting the lives of their subordinates in danger for their own aim. In fact, leaders were callous and cold-hearted. Therefore, it was rare to come across an affectionate leader like Yen Hong-yi. Yen Hong-yi was extremely majestic. That blade wielder was very reluctant to give up. However, he couldn't disobey Yen Hong-yi's words after Yen Hong-yi had scolded him. Yen Hong-yi saw that everyone was reluctant. However, they didn't dare to go against his words either. He turned around towards Yishuan and said, "I'm sorry. This family drama must have amused you. There's nothing to pardon. The righteousness of the Villa Lord has only made me admire you even more." Yishuan cupped his hands in obeisance and stated. Yen Hong-yi sighed and said, "I am Yen Hong-yi, the Villa Lord of the Piyuan Villa that lies in the jurisdiction of Shangyang City. And these are my younger brothers. I am Yishuan. It's nice to meet you, Villa Lord Yen. And this is my little sister Xiaoya." Yishuan gave the introduction. "We would be troubling you for a little while, Villa Lord Yen." No problem at all. "Young brother Yi, you are most welcome. It's not a big thing. We will go forward once we've tidied up here. Yan Hongyi smiled and said in a straightforward manner. He then turned around and ordered everyone to collect the corpses of those star beasts. These were top-notch materials. Moreover, many of the wounded individuals required some care. Everyone's working speed was very quick. They were acting in harmony, and were showing mutual understanding and coordination. It was obvious that they weren't doing this for the first time. So everyone knew that they must pack up as soon as possible. Else, the smell of blood might attract other greedy star beasts. These people were used to drifting aimlessly in the space. It was hard to tell how superior their skills were in these matters in front of an amateur like Yi Shiwen. Our villa lord is kind that he has offered you shelter. You had better not be a spy of the Li clan. Otherwise, you are done for. The blade wielder flew over to Yi Shiwen and warned him in a cold manner. His fierce expression scared Xiaoya as she stood beside Yi Shiwen. So, she slightly retreated from her current position. She was visibly somewhat scared. Yi Shiwen frowned. He didn't like this. However, he didn't attack. He must get out of this hallucinatory star field with the help of these people. Anyway, he would part ways with them after he had gotten out of the star field. So, there would be no dispute afterwards. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had noticed that this blade-wielding man had a bad attitude. However, he had also realized that this man was thinking about the well-being of his Piyuan villa. Yi Shiwen certainly didn't like his attitude, but he couldn't say that he hated it either. The blade wielder went to help other people in clearing the stuff after he had warned Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen looked at Xiaoya with a calm and gentle expression in his eyes. It seems like someone is targeting this team. Yi Shiwen had caught this information from the conversation between these people. However, it didn't bother him. He would merely take out the corpse of the Star Colossus, and he would death-slap anyone who'd tried to cause him trouble. In fact, this would hold true as long as he didn't come across a great sage expert. Moreover, he was confident that he would manage to escape even if a great sage expert were to attack. The blood slave had become increasingly proficient at controlling the Star Colossus. So, Yi Shiwen had stopped making it come out of the Star Colossus body. Yi Shiwen simply made the blood slave reside in the body of the Star Colossus, and had been slowly transforming into its soul. This had indeed been a very big help for him. Yi Shiwen had averted disaster many times in these last 3 years' expeditions because the blood slave was controlling the Star Colossus. The blood slave would be able to unleash the full potential of this Star Colossus once it would completely transform into the soul of this Star Colossus. Then, even the great sage experts wouldn't be a problem anymore. Of course, this would happen after many years. The people of the Piyuan villa cleared up the corpses rather quickly. Yan Hongyi took out a ship-shaped divine tool after everyone had cleared up the area. It was a pseudo-sage tool that was used for sailing in space. However, it was good enough for moving faster. Everyone went aboard the ship. The ship then transformed into a streamer of light, and shuttled in the universe. Yi Shiwen was standing on the deck of this large ship. He realized that this ship was moving at such a high speed that he couldn't even feel the outside. Moreover, it was sailing so smoothly that it seemed as if it was treading on level ground. He had never ridden on a speed-type divine tool because he was a lone operator. Moreover, he also had a magical power like the devil wings. Also, he had never seen a divine tool that could catch up with his Sage Realm speed. However, he felt that he required a similar speed-type divine tool that could fly. This was because he had a little girl along with him now. Young brother Yi, don't mind that Hu Angwo's words. That guy is always like that, but he doesn't have bad intentions. Yan Hongyi walked up to Yi Zaiwen's side and said, It appeared that there was no need to worry about driving this ship. One only needed to input the route and such flying divine tools. These tools could then fly on autopilot mode. Yi Shiwen smiled. He knew that Yan Hongyi was referring to the person who had come to warn him a while ago. However, he didn't care about it either. After all, his temper would go out of hand in his lifetime if something like this would start to bother him. It's all right. Yi Shiwen laughed. It doesn't matter. Where does young brother Yi come from, and where is he headed? Yan Hongyi asked. I have come from the meteor world, and I haven't decided where I wish to go. So I can go anywhere. Ha ha. Yi Shiwen laughed and replied. He hadn't decided where he wanted to go. He could go to any place that would come along the way as long as he was traveling in the direction of the true martial world. It would obviously depend upon the situation at the time. However, he hadn't thought about any particular place that he wanted to go to. Young brother, you might as well visit our Piyuan villa since he hasn't decided where he wishes to go. Yan Hongyi smiled and said. He looked at Xiaoya. He was indeed straightforward and generous. However, he was no fool. He had showed special fondness towards Yi Shiwen, and had hitched him a ride. However, it wasn't that he had made this decision in a casual manner. After all, he was the leader of a force, and the survival of this force depended on his actions. So, he could take this force to hell if he wasn't careful. He had favored Yi Shiwen because of Xiaoya. He had never seen someone with such a pure bearing. She was as pure as a baby. She was without the slightest bit of contamination. Someone with such a pure mind could instinctively judge who was good and who was bad. After all, no amount of disguise could conceal one's malice from an infant. And Xiaoya was so close to Yi Shiwen. This showed that Yi Shiwen wasn't a bad person. This was the reason why he had allowed Yi Shiwen to come aboard the ship. And he believed that his judgment couldn't be wrong. After all, he hadn't been the leader of this force for so many years for nothing. He must have some ability to make good judgments. Yi Shiwen obviously didn't know what was inside Yan Hongyi's mind. However, he became very excited because of this invitation. The so-called a man is alive when he walks on the most dangerous roads, eats the best delicacies, has the most beautiful woman, fights the most powerful enemies, makes friends with the heroes who deserve his friendship, and does what he loves to do. And Yi Shiwen believed that a man like Yan Hongyi was undoubtedly worthy of his friendship. Well, how can I refuse if the elder brother has invited me? Yi Shiwen smiled back. Anyway, he hadn't decided where he wanted to go. So, he could easily go with the flow for now. Good, you're very frank and straightforward. Yan Hongyi admired Yi Shiwen when he saw that Yi Shiwen was neither timid nor fake. To be continued. Chapter 526. A+A Chapter 526 assists in the fight. Bang! The ship was flying with a fast speed when it suddenly began to shake violently. It seemed as if it had met with a huge impact. Villa Lord, it's not good. Several hundred star beasts have appeared in front. A man suddenly came tumbling out from the crowd. Everyone looked on, and found that several hundred star beasts had surrounded the ship. Moreover, each of them was as big as a hill. They looked like the magnified versions of fierce wolves. Their entire bodies were covered with silver fur. And that silver fur was glowing in this dark universe. There were innumerable. And these hundreds of beasts had tightly contained them in the space. Damn it! They've found us! Yan Hongyi's complexion turned unsightly as he said these words. A dreadful aura soared into the sky from the middle of these star beasts group. Then, a fierce mountain-sized wolf slowly appeared in front of everyone. Fierce Star Wolf King! Everyone's complexion turned deathly pale when they saw this monster. They even forgot about those other hill-sized fierce star wolves. There was usually a certain relation between height and strength. However, it didn't necessarily mean that one was going to be insanely powerful because one had a big stature. However, this fierce Star Wolf King had truly frightened them. It had already surpassed the peak of the Sage Realm, and was currently at the Sage Small Perfection Realm. And this had scared them out of their wits. Yan Hongyi was the strongest among the people of the Piyuan Villa. He was at the Sage Small Perfection Realm. However, he would have to put everything at stake while fighting this Wolf King. Obviously, it wouldn't be that easy since this Wolf King's ominous energy had gone off the charts. The outcome of a fight between a fierce beast and human expert of the same realm would be difficult to predict. Some experts would win, while others would lose rather tragically. This varied from person to person. There were some geniuses who possessed the power to crush opponents belonging to the same realm. It wouldn't have been a very difficult thing to deal with this fierce Starwolf King for such a genius. After all, they possessed superb divine tools, outstanding cultivation, and an ancient heritage. So, their attacks were far more powerful than those of their peers. However, it wasn't that easy for ordinary people. They neither possessed powerful divine tools, nor did they have formidable martial arts roots. Moreover, they didn't even have a solid foundation. Consequently, even a group of 3 such individuals would be unable to defeat a fierce beast of the same realm. Finally arrived? Yi Shiwen muttered. He shot a glance towards that powerful-looking fierce Starwolf King. Then, he looked at Xiaoya with a smile of reassurance. After all, she didn't need to worry as long as he was there with her. However, he didn't know that Xiaoya wasn't worried. Her complexion had remained unchanged. She had faced all kinds of situations ever since she had tagged with Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if she felt that there was no need to worry as long as Yi Shiwen was by her side. Brothers, we are in this predicament because of me. So, it is my duty to go and engage that fierce Starwolf King. Meanwhile, you guys must look for an opportunity to escape. Yan Hongyi took out a spear, grinned, and said these words. The look in his eyes made it seem that he didn't find himself to be a match for these star beasts. Villa Lord! Villa Lord, let's go together. We aren't afraid of death. These star beasts have surrounded us. How can we escape? So, let's go together. We mustn't let these lowly beasts ridicule us, even if we die. These star beasts had long been wise and clever. This was because they possessed spiritual intelligence. Their battle formation resembled that of a battalion of soldiers. They had already surrounded them from all directions. Moreover, their encirclement seemed to be impenetrable. Come with me. I will go and engage that fierce Starwolf King. Come to give me backup if you guys manage to kill those other fierce wolves in time. We still have a chance of survival. Yan Hongyi didn't resist any further. After all, he knew that his previous plan was hopeless. Moreover, there was only a slim chance of survival, and that too only if they went all out to hold their own against these beasts. Young brother Yi, I'm sorry that I've dragged you into this. I shouldn't have done that. You must take off with little sister as soon as you get the opportunity, Yan Hongyi said. Relax. I have a plan, Yi Shiwen replied. However, he felt that many of the people of Piyuan Villa that surrounded him were looking at him with bad intentions. He deliberated a bit, and understood that these people were suspecting him of being a spy of the Li clan, just as Hu Andwa had earlier suspected him. They felt that it couldn't be a coincidence that they had come across these many fierce beasts after a mysterious person had come aboard their ship. It was also probable that he was the one who had attracted these beasts. Yi Shiwen merely smiled. After all, everything would become clear from the outcome of his actions at this juncture. How? Everyone was still discussing here, but that fierce Starwolf King couldn't wait anymore. So, it howled loudly. And its howl shook the entire world. The void collapsed. And a huge black crack spread out wherever the sound waves from its howl went. Then, the huge crack spread out towards the ship. Humph! Yan Hongyi coldly snorted. He advanced, and arrived at the front of the ship. He pointed his spear towards the vast emptiness. And a boundless ripple proliferated and scattered in the vast space. Then, that ripple suddenly collided with that huge crack. Bang! A vast chunk of the void collapsed under the suppression force. The fight between 2 senior experts of the Sage Small Perfection realm had barely begun. However, it had already shaken the entire world. Everyone's expressions had turned serious. The first clash was enough to determine that this Starwolf King was much more tyrannical than they had previously imagined. The Starwolf King's loud howl stirred up the flock of fierce wolves. And their eyes turned red. Their claws dug into the space, and split open deep black cracks in the void. Howl! The fierce Starwolf King let out a loud howl like a sonic boom. Those fierce wolves also looked upward and howled one after another. They had launched a long-range raid towards the ship by doing so. The long-range raid of each of those small hill-sized beasts was overwhelming. The void shook as they approached with a scary momentum. It seemed as if violent waves were causing turbulence in an ocean. Die! The people of the Puyuan villa also roared as they rushed out to face those fierce starwolves. Bang! The seemingly endless horde of the fierce starwolves suddenly collided with the matrix formation that was protecting the ship. 1/3 of the matrix formation was destroyed in a flash. This was inevitable since these fierce starwolves were too many in number. Even the ship's protective layer couldn't endure such a massive impact. However, the semi-sage level fierce wolves were instantly turned into ashes by the barrier. Yi Zaiwen's expression had also turned stern. The real fight was about to begin. The ominous aura of the enemy penetrated through the void, and blew against his face. This was a true battle. Be a good girl, and stay on the ship until I return. All right? Yi Shiwen looked at Xiaoya and spoke after everyone had left the ship. Xiaoya was only at the Xiantian small perfection realm at present. Her cultivation speed was extremely quick. However, she couldn't travel in the space by herself. Moreover, she could die here because there was no air in this place. This was her vulnerability, and nothing could be done about it. Earlier, Yi Shiwen was there to protect her. However, he would have to engage in the battle now. He couldn't dare to say that he could protect her out there, at least not with confidence. Therefore, it was better to make her stay on the ship. Okay, Xiaoya softly replied. She was a very clever kid. Yan Hongyi had already started to clash with that fierce Starwolf King. His spear was waving like a dragon. It devoured a vast chunk of space as it rushed towards that fierce Starwolf King. Yan Hongyi didn't hold back. His entire real elemental energy suddenly burst out of his body with an incredible spear beam. Howl! The fierce Starwolf King opened its large mouth, as if it were a sacrificial bull. A dreadful spirit energy fluctuated and burst out of its mouth. The terrifying cannon beam traveled through the void and collided with Yan Hongyi's spear beam. Bang! Two great powerhouses had begun to clash, and this resulted in crackling sounds being produced. The scene looked exceptionally stunning. The clash of their dreadful powers resulted in energy waves from the point of the collision. Those energy waves then swept all across, and they shattered the space wherever they went. The fierce Starwolf King issued an angry howl, and its silver fur began to glow golden. Then, it dug its claws into the space, bolted forward explosively, and transformed into a golden streamer. It arrived in front of Yan Hongyi in an instant. Yan Hongyi hadn't thought that this fierce Starwolf King would have such incredible speed. He hadn't even gotten any time to react, but it had already arrived in front of him. However, he couldn't retreat. That's because his whole team would collapse if he were to fall back. He could only clench his teeth and prepare for battle. He brandished his spear and suddenly trampled the void under his feet. Then, he darted forward like a rolling mountain to crush that approaching golden light. Boom! The boundless collision issued dreadful energy waves. The void shook, and cracks that resembled a spider's web spread out. A tremendous energy wave swirled about violently, and a figure was sent flying by that shock wave. It was Yan Hongyi. Yan Hongyi felt a strange taste in his mouth. He was about to spout a mouthful of blood. However, he knew that he couldn't spout blood at this. After all, his power would suffer a heavy loss if he did that. Therefore, he forcibly swallowed the blood essence. Consequently, his face turned an unusually dark shade of red. Moreover, he was forced to retreat over a dozen meters before he was able to break his momentum. These human experts were undoubtedly weaker when compared to these fierce beasts. Therefore, fighting with these fierce beasts was akin to courting death for a majority of these human experts. However, that wasn't true for a freak like Yi Shiwen. The fierce starwolves weren't considered among the top-notch star beasts. Nonetheless, their ferocity and instincts far surpassed that of humans. However, the human experts had one advantage over these fierce beasts. They possessed intelligence. They could use tools, divine tools, talismans, and whatnot. Only these things made the human experts eligible to contend against these fierce beasts. Yan Hongyi was an old expert of the society. So, he obviously knew this fact very well. However, he didn't have any other method at this time. Moreover, he couldn't retreat. He could only drag time since he had to hold up until the people of the Piyuan villa had killed those other fierce beasts. They could then help him escape, or they could provide him with backup. He would obviously have more room to choose then. How? The eyes of the Silver Wolf King had turned red. Moreover, there was an ominous glint in them. The Wolf King issued a thunderous howl once again. Its claws suddenly grabbed the void, and issued a metal clanging sound. It opened its mouth like a sacrificial bowl once again. Endless spirit energies suddenly gathered. And another spirit energy cannon beam was ejected, but not towards Yan Hongyi. Instead, it was directed towards the ship. This Silver Wolf King was sentient, and had already acquired spiritual intelligence. So, it had obviously made out that these human experts wouldn't be able to escape without their ship. In fact, they would be sitting ducks. Yi Zaiwen's exceptional flying magical power was extremely rare. The majority of human experts didn't have a divine tool they could use for flying away. Consequently, their flying speeds were no match for those of these demon beasts. It's not good! Damn it! Yan Hongyi stopped minding the Silver Wolf King for the time being. However, it was already too late for him to stop this attack that was going towards the ship. However, a frightening sword rainbow dropped from above at this time. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.